Chapter 593. Genius Remembers Love in 1 Second/Small? We provide you with fascinating novels to read. Lightning bolts Wanxiang wreaking havoc. The cross-shaped sword beam that was a mixture of two colors was extremely domineering and sharp. It suffused a startling stream of light as it streaked across the sky like a meteor. It was extremely stunning. The terrifying aura contained within the cross-shaped sword beam immediately changed Xiaohou's high-spirited expression. He never expected that he would be unable to defeat Chen Zong despite using all his strength and raising his combat strength to the early stages of the six-star realm. Furthermore, he had used a terrifying killer move like Wanxiang Lightning Bolts Wanxiang. Explosive Lightning Blast. Xiaohou clenched his fist and punched out. Terrifying lightning bolts condensed into a golden ball of lightning that blasted at Chen Zong. It exploded as a shockwave spread across a radius of several meters. The cross-shaped sword beam shot out. It pressed forward with indomitable might. All obstructions were torn apart by the two swords. This sharpness faintly revealed its peerless intent. Instantly, Chen Zong had a clearer idea of the killer move he wanted to create. Slash. 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 Nice one, kid. In the pavilion, the middle-aged scholar couple smiled faintly. They were astonished by the strength Chen Zong displayed. Is this his true strength? The glint in Mo Sen's eyes deepened. Brother Chen is indeed very strong. Qing Chen smiled faintly. Is the 100-win streak of the 100 battles arena that powerful? Many people were puzzled. Unknowingly, Xiaoba clenched his fist. His sword was mighty as sword beams surged. Xiaohou struck out with both hands as he constantly blasted out astonishing golden balls of lightning. They exploded one after another but were destroyed by Chen Zong's sword strike. The remaining dozens of arm-thick golden lightning bolts circled around and struck at Chen Zong in a pincer attack. However, Chen Zong did not seem to sense the dozens of terrifying lightning bolts behind him. He continued attacking Xiaohou with his two swords. In terms of realm, Chen Zong exceeded Xiaohou, completely suppressing him. When his combat strength was raised to Xiaohou's level, Chen Zong's execution of his killer move was gradually perfected. As a result, Chen Zong's strength reached an even more astonishing level. Like a hot knife through butter, it tore through everything as the cross-shaped sword beam struck Xiaohou's body. Xiaohou's expression changed drastically. He could clearly sense his protective true energy being torn apart. Even the defensive strength of his body-tempering cultivation technique had been torn apart. The terrifying might made Xiaohou feel that even the Grade 3 pseudo-spiritual artifact inner armor would not be able to withstand it. Once it cut into his body, even if he didn't die, he would be severely injured. At that instant, the jade token around Xiaohou's neck suddenly trembled. The twin dragons on it seemed to come alive. As they swam, they transformed into two phantoms that emanated out. Instantly, they covered Xiaohou's body as though they were coiling around him. The cross-shaped sword beam cleaved down as Chen Zong felt an astounding tenacity block the two swords. His eyes also saw the two dragon phantoms on Xiaohou's body. Not only did Chen Zong see it, but many people also saw it. They were all stunned. What's that? It should be a protective artifact. The twin dragon tokens are Xiaoba's protective treasure. They were actually lent to Xiaohou. It's actually Xiaoba's protective secret treasure. Immediately, many gazes looked at Xiaoba. He sure is despicable. He actually lent his protective secret treasure to someone else. It doesn't matter if he's despicable or not. After all, it's a life-and-death battle in the life-and-death arena. He naturally has to use all the strength he can. This chapter isn't finished. Please turn the page. With a protective treasure like the twin dragon tokens, Xiaohou is already in an invincible position. Chen Zong can't crack the twin dragon token's defensive strength, so Xiaohou doesn't need to defend himself. All he needs to do is constantly attack. Chernzong is in danger. What a pity for a top genius who can be ranked on the minor heaven ascension roll. The moment the protective treasure, the twin dragon tokens, appeared, no one thought highly of Chernzong. Even Qing Chen felt the same. Protective treasures were very rare. Although the twin dragon tokens were incomparable to a true spirit artifact, its value was several times higher than a grade 3 pseudo-spirit artifact. To put it simply, any protective treasure was worth at least 100 inferior grade spirit origins. The more precious ones cost more than 1,000. Furthermore, even if one had the spirit origins, one might not necessarily be able to buy one. This was because protective treasures were even rarer than grade 3 pseudo-spirit artifacts. They were typically in the hands of large factions and were rarely circulated in the outside world. Xiaoba and Xiaozhen were both top geniuses, but only Xiaoba had such a protective treasure. Xiaozhen did not have it. If not, Xiaoba would not have needed to lend his protective treasure to Xiaozhen. Xiaozhen had also forgotten about the matter of the twin dragon tokens. Now, seeing Chernzong's twin swords being blocked without being able to injure him in the slightest, he revealed a sinister sneer as his killing intent burned. Don't waste your efforts. Your sword has no way of breaking through my defense. As Xiaozhen spoke, he unleashed his attacks. Terrifying lightning palms blasted out as golden bolts of lightning as thick as an arm cleaved down. Chernzong had no choice but to quickly dodge as he brandished his sword to defend. He shattered them one after another, but every time he shattered a bolt, he would suffer a certain amount of impact. With the twin dragon token's protection, Xiaozhen was not worried about his safety at all. This was because it was his elder brother's treasure. It was a powerful protective treasure that could withstand attacks from pseudo-transcendence. Even though Chernzong was an expert at the pseudo-transcendence realm, he was unable to break through the twin dragon token's protection in a few strikes. After the two swords shattered the bolts of lightning and the lightning palms, they struck the twin dragon phantoms on the twin dragon tokens. They were still blocked. Xiaozhen was completely unaffected. A sinister smile hung on his lips as he ruthlessly struck out with his palms at Chernzong. When there was no need for defense and he could attack freely, Xiaozhen became even more terrifying. His attacks were even more powerful, increasing the pressure on Chernzong. Chernzong's expression was cold. He did not panic because of the protective treasure that had appeared on Xiaozhen's body. Instead, his mind raced as he tried to think of a solution. The Wrath of Wind and Lightning's secret technique could not be maintained forever. According to the theory, it would last about 15 minutes. In other words, the Wrath of Wind and Lightning's powers would vanish after 15 minutes. When that happened, his combat strength would drop, making it harder for him to deal with Xiaozhen. Therefore, he needed to think of a solution to break through Xiaozhen's protective treasure in the next 15 minutes. Only then would he have a chance of killing Xiaozhen. No, he had already used the Wrath of Wind and Lightning for a short while. There was less than 15 minutes left. 15 minutes seemed long, but it was actually very short. It would pass very quickly. It was a pressing matter, but the more pressing it was, the calmer Chernzong became. Up to this point in the battle, Chernzong was still hiding something. It was the power of minor true intent. In addition, he still had the 1,000 essence body explosion pills that he had yet to consume. Chernzong believed that since he had many enemies, it was best to hide as much as possible. Immediately, all sorts of information regarding protective treasures flashed through Chernzong's mind. Protective treasures were similar to pseudo-spirit artifacts, but they were also different. According to their classification, they were classified as treasures. Such treasures often required a drip of blood to bind the owner with a mental imprint before they could unleash their full power. However, if the owner of the treasure was willing, they could lend it to others. This chapter is not finished. Please turn the page. Treasures were often unable to unleash their full power. Typically, they would only be able to unleash 30% of their power. Chen Zong had vaguely heard the voice beneath the life and death arena. The protective treasure belonged to Xiahou Ba and not Xiahou Zhen. Therefore, it was very likely that Xiahou Ba would not really give the protective treasure to Xiahou Zhen. Instead, he would only borrow it temporarily. If Xiahou Zhen were to borrow it, he would only be able to unleash 30% of its power. He still had a chance of destroying it. However, he had to use all his strength. With a thought, Chen Zong dodged the 2 golden bolts of lightning. He gathered all his strength and charged at Xiahou Zhen once again. The 2 swords instantly struck out in unison, turning extremely violent. It was like an endless wave of fury. Chen Zong changed his method and no longer demonstrated the embryonic form of his ultimate move. Although the reigning sword cannon's ultimate move was very powerful in his imagination, its strength was limited before it took form. Now, in order to break through Xiahou Zhen's protective powers with all his strength, Chen Zong used the 40th stance of the reigning sword art. With each strike and stance, Chen Zong's arms could not be seen. There were only countless sword flashes that poured out like a waterfall. It was as though the Milky Way was hanging upside down and the sea was flowing. The sword flashes were endless and endless. Every strike was extremely fast. The 2 swords that blotted out the sky filled Xiahou Zhen's vision, blanketing the world. It left him dumbfounded. Chen Zong's strikes were too fast. When he unleashed all his strength, it completely exceeded Xiahou Zhen's vision. It made it difficult for Xiahou Zhen to react or attack. There was no other way. Chen Zong's 2 swords were too fast. They clashed continuously, leaving no gaps. Even if Xiahou Zhen wanted to counterattack, he could not find an opportunity. Although he was protected by the twin dragon tokens, preventing him from suffering any damage, the terrifying and concentrated sword flashes still left Xiahou Zhen shuddering from the bottom of his heart. "You have no way of breaking through my defenses," Xiahou Zhen roared. He ignored the sword flashes that assaulted him and struck out again. However, before he could even unleash his palm strike's might, it was drowned out by Chen Zong's sword flashes. When a sword's speed reached a certain level, it could almost ignore everything. In the pavilion, the couple's eyes immediately lit up. The speed at which Chen Zong attacked was just too terrifying. It was much faster than before. Chen Zong's body emanated a platinum-colored glow. It was a sign that Golden Jade unbreakable body had been pushed to its limit. It protected his arms and the muscles on his body. After all, Chen Zong's extreme sword speed was unleashed at such a high speed. It would place a heavy burden on his body, especially his arms. It would damage the muscles in his arms. Xiahou Ba wore a solemn expression. He could not help but feel worried deep in his heart. He had only lent the twin dragon tokens to Xiahou Zhen. He could only use 30% of its strength. What if it was destroyed? No, that wouldn't happen. Even if he could only use 30% of its strength, it was not something an early 6-star combat strength could destroy. However, for some reason, Xiahou Ba felt uneasy in his heart. The 2 swords came in a continuous barrage like a storm. Every strike struck the same spot on the twin dragon token's defensive strength. It was something that could only be achieved by a superb sword art realm and perfect control of one's strength. Unknowingly, an undetectable white mark gradually appeared at the spot where the 2 swords struck. Chen Zong's eyes glowed as he stared at the white mark. The final strike. I'll use all my strength. Instantly, he unleashed the last of his vertically and horizontally great true force surged into the heavenly sun sword. The tip of the sword shone like resplendent stars. A sharp beam and a sharp fluctuation emanated out, sweeping through the surroundings. When it swept past the crowd, it immediately made them feel like they were being torn apart by an invisible sword. They could not help but tremble. End of chapter. Chapter 594. Genius 1 second. Remember love /go/little? Shua Net provides you with wonderful novels to read. Its sharpness could cut through all things. Its sharpness could pierce through the world. Little true intent. Too little true intents. Immediately, the guards at the edge of the life and death ring and the pseudo-transcendents below the life and death ring were horrified. The gray-robed old man beside Qing Chen could not suppress his shock and instantly released an astonishing aura. Although it was instantly restrained, it still made the people around the life and death ring feel like they were being suppressed by an invisible mountain. They were all horrified. This little guy. The scholarly couple in the pavilion was dumbfounded. Aluo, it looks like it's not him who is worthy of the heavenly sun's sword and earth-een sword, but the heavenly sun's sword and earth-een sword that are worthy of him. The middle-aged scholarly man said with a wry smile after his shock. The beautiful woman did not answer, but her eyes flashed as she stared at Chen Zong. Secret sword, star touch. Sword edge true intent. Sword edge true intent. Other than infusing the true intent of water flow into it, Chen Zong had used all his strength. This strike was much more powerful than the one he used to injure the scarred pseudo-transcendent in Ascending Dragon City's dungeon. The two swords violently struck the same point of the Supreme Twin Dragon Token's protective power. Although they did not break it, they weakened it. What was truly fatal was this strike. A strike that contained all his strength. Break. The extremely sharp tip of the sword glowed with a dazzling golden light. There seemed to be a blazing flame burning in the golden light that could incinerate everything. There was a soft cracking sound like porcelain being struck. It was very subtle, so subtle that the people outside the life and death ring did not hear it. However, Xiahou Jin's face changed drastically in an instant. It was as if all blood had drained from his face. His eyes were filled with shock. The sound was clearly the sound of the Supreme Twin Dragon Token's protective power being broken. How could he break through the Supreme Twin Dragon Token's protective power? Without any time to think, Xiahou Jin's well-honed instincts made him quickly dodge and retreat. The sword tore through space like a meteor piercing through the moon. After it tore through the protective powers of the Twin Dragon Tokens, it headed straight for Xiahou Jin. Xiahou Jin quickly avoided being struck in his vitals, but the extremely sharp sword tip still tore through Xiahou Jin's robes. It tore through his pseudo-spirit artifact armor and penetrated his body, severing his bones. The strike left behind a half-meter-long gash on Xiahou Jin's chest. Blood gushed out as Xiahou Jin felt his strength drain away with the gushing blood. His injuries were not light. Most importantly, the terrifying sword qi was wreaking havoc in his body. Xiahou Jin had no choice but to use all his strength to resist. He was unable to continue fighting. Around the life and death ring, everyone's faces were filled with shock. Their minds were frozen, and they couldn't react at all. With his next strike, Chen Zong did not hesitate to stab at Xiahou Jin's glabella. Stop! Xiahou Ba's face was filled with killing intent as he roared angrily. He struck out with his palm at Chen Zong's back. If he was struck by a palm strike with an 8-star combat strength, he would be severely injured even if he didn't die. Chen Zong's back turned numb. The palm strike was just too powerful. He did not dare take it head-on and could only temporarily give up on killing Xiahou Jin as he quickly dodged. Immediately, Xiahou Ba charged into the life and death ring. As he leaped into the air, he struck out with his fist again. The terrifying fist force roared like a thunderclap. It was a lot more terrifying than the hasty palm strike from before. Chen Zong's expression was cold and solemn. The terrifying pressure from the punch left his scalp tingling as though it was about to explode. His entire body felt extremely uncomfortable. This chapter is not finished. Please turn the page. Using Point Star's secret sword had exhausted all of his unhindered true power, and using 2 minor true intents and combining them, had also exhausted more than half of his mental strength. Xiahou Ba was an expert on the Heaven Ascension roll. He had astonishing strength with an 8-star combat strength. Chernzong was no match for him. However, the moment Xiahou Ba attacked, the terrifying fist force was shattered by someone. The attacker was none other than the City Logistics Department's guard. The guard had reacted a little too slowly due to Xiahou Zhen being injured by Chernzong's sword. As a result, he failed to block Xiahou Ba's palm strike in time. Fortunately, Chernzong dodged it himself. Now, how could Xiahou Ba's punch hit Chernzong? Wouldn't that be a slap to the Heaven Ascension City's City Logistics Department's face? Xiahou Ba, do you think this is the sacred martial palace? The guard's face was filled with anger. Get out of my way. Xiahou Ba's face was livid as his eyes spewed fire. The killing intent in his heart was like a volcano that was about to erupt. Xiahou Ba, it looks like you want to violate Heaven Ascension City's rules. Very well. The guard was even more annoyed. As soon as he finished speaking, a few more guards landed on the life and death ring and surrounded Xiahou Ba. The auras released by these guards were extremely powerful. They were all pseudo-transcendent realm experts. Each of them had a cold and solemn expression as they stared at Xiahou Ba with gleaming eyes. As long as Xiahou Ba made any strange movements, they would immediately take action and kill him. This was the rule of Ascension City. Of course, if Xiahou Ba behaved himself, they wouldn't directly take action against him for the sake of the Martial Saint Palace. Being surrounded by several pseudo-transcendent realm guards and being secretly stared at by powerful gazes, it was like a blazing sun shining down from the sky. This was what Xiahou Ba was truly afraid of. Suppressing his anger, Xiahou Ba quickly calmed down. He loosened his clenched fists and immediately walked toward Xiahou Zhen. Since he could not kill Chernzong now, he could only take Xiahou Zhen back to treat his injuries. Brother! Xiahou Zhen's face was filled with shame. His injuries were not light, but fortunately, he was not weak. His life was not in danger, but he had lost face. Wait. Chernzong took a step forward as his gaze landed on Xiahou Ba, who was presiding over the life and death ring. This is a life and death battle between me and Xiahou Zhen. According to the rules of the life and death ring, no one is allowed to interfere without my permission. What are you doing now? Immediately after, Chernzong's gaze swept the surroundings and landed on the guard presiding over the life and death battle. He did not say a word as he waited for an answer. The rules were clearly stated before the life and death battle. Xiahou Ba, don't do things more than 3 times. The guard's face was cold. I admit defeat. Xiahou Zhen roared with all his might. Although saying those words made his heart feel like it was being pierced by a sharp sword, he did not want to be killed. Zhen has already admitted defeat. Always leave a way out. Xiahou Ba ignored the guard as his cold gaze landed on Chernzong's face. It was filled with killing intent. What sounded like a calm tone sounded like the repressed magma of a volcano. You were the one who came looking for trouble with me in the beginning. You were also the one who requested the life and death battle. Do you think you can leave after admitting defeat? Do you think this is a game? Chernzong gave a sinister smile. His sharp eyes made Xiahou Zhen's eyelids twitch involuntarily. What do you want? Xiahou Zhen suddenly felt a little afraid, and his behavior infuriated Xiahou Ba. Chernzong, this matter ends here. Regardless, Xiahou Zhen was his younger brother. Xiahou Ba's figure flashed and appeared in front of Chernzong. He stopped Chernzong but did not dare take action. If he did, he would be killed on the spot. In fact, Xiahou Ba knew very well that even if he took action, he might not be able to kill Chernzong. He might not even be able to hit Chernzong. However, Chernzong ignored Xiahou Ba. With a flash, he circled around Xiahou Ba. Xiahou Ba's figure flashed. This chapter is not finished. Please turn the page. He wanted to intercept Chernzong but was held back by the guard. Once again, he was surrounded by the guard. Step by step, Chernzong walked toward Xiahou Zhen. His footsteps sounded like a death warrant. Xiahou Zhen could not help but tremble. Was Chen Zong really going to kill him? Beneath the life and death arena, everyone stared at Chen Zong with widened eyes. All of them held their breath. Was Chen Zong really going to kill Xiahou Zhen? Xiahou Zhen was a core disciple of the sacred martial palace. He enjoyed a high status and was ranked on the minor heaven ascension roll. He had a promising future. As for his elder brother, Xiahou Ba, who was ranked on the heaven ascension roll, he had astounding combat strength. As for his grandfather, he was ranked on the greater heaven ascension roll. He was a famous expert at the paramount mortal realm. A sect with 3 rolls had long made the Xiahou family a famous existence in the ascension heaven domain. If Xiahou Zhen were to be killed here, the Xiahou lineage would not let the matter rest despite the rules of the life and death arena. They would definitely seek revenge on Chen Zong in a frenzied manner. Was Chen Zong really going to kill Xiahou Zhen? When he stood in front of Xiahou Zhen's expression suddenly changed. Killing intent burned in his eyes as he raised his hand. An extremely sharp beam of light tore through the air, bringing with it a foul stench. Chen Zong's expression did not change at all. With a flash of his body, the foul-smelling beam of light flew past his head. Following that, a sword flash bloomed. "Stop!" Xiahou Ba roared angrily with hatred. He wanted to charge forward to stop Chen Zong, but was forced back by the guard. "Chen Zong, stop!" Xiahou Ba roared like a trapped beast. Xiahou Zhen's final ferocious look was still on his face, but his glabella had been pierced. His final move had failed to do anything to Chen Zong. Instead, he had lost his life. "You deserve to die. You deserve to die." Xiahou Ba's eyes spewed fire as though he wanted to burn Chen Zong to ashes. However, Chen Zong did not even look at him. He quickly removed the items from Xiahou Zhen's body. A mustard seed bag, a grade 3 pseudo-spirit artifact glove, and the twin dragon token around his neck. When he saw the twin dragon token land in Chen Zong's hands, Xiahou Ba's eyes turned bloodshot. Everyone below the life and death arena was dumbfounded. Killed. Chen Zong had really killed Xiahou Zhen. Wasn't he afraid of the Xiahou lineage's revenge? The guards were astonished as well. They believed that Chen Zong would not kill Xiahou Zhen. After all, the consequences of killing Xiahou Zhen were severe. They never expected him to kill Xiahou Zhen. He did not hesitate to attack. "Make way." Xiahou Ba calmed down. However, his expression was as gloomy as dark clouds. Lightning flashed in his eyes and his voice was deep and hoarse. However, it made the hearts of those who heard it palpitate uncontrollably. Pushing the guards away, Xiahou Ba looked at Chen Zong. His eyes seemed to exude a deathly aura. "Return the twin dragon token to me." Spoils of war. Chen Zong smiled faintly as he stored the twin dragon token into his mustard seed bag. Xiahou Ba nearly vomited blood. Immediately, he jumped off the life and death arena without turning his head back. He quickly left, but his body was suffused with terrifying hatred and killing intent. It made everyone hurriedly avoid him in horror. The present Xiahou Ba was the most terrifying. It was not that he did not want to kill Chen Zong, but that he was unable to kill Chen Zong. However, anyone who angered him would face terrible consequences. All of them looked horrified as they stared incredulously at Chen Zong. He did not even return Xiahou Ba's twin dragon token. He was really planning on completely falling out with the Xiahou lineage. However, since Xiahou Zhen had already been killed, it did not make a difference. "Thank you, guards, for upholding justice." After Chen Zong collected the spoils of war, he cupped his hands and thanked the guards on the life and death arena. End of chapter. Chapter 595. Geniuses remember love in 1 second go? We provide you with fascinating novels to read. The life and death arena battle finally ended in an outcome that most people did not expect. As the initiator of the life and death arena, Xiahou Zhen had died. He had been killed by his opponent Chen Zong. Instantly, the entire Heaven Ascension city was abuzz with discussion. Fascinating, too fascinating. I never expected Chen Zong to be so strong. When Xiahou Zhen had the twin dragon medallion, I thought that Chen Zong was doomed. I never expected Chen Zong to be able to break through the twin dragon medallion's defensive powers. In the restaurant, many people discussed as they drank. Not everyone had seen the life-and-death arena battle with their own eyes. That Chen Zong is truly foolish to the extreme. He actually tried to kill Xiahou Zhen. He has completely offended the Xiahou lineage. He doesn't have long to live. Someone analyzed in a self-opinionated manner. You are the foolish one. If that Chen Zong did not kill Xiahou Zhen, he would definitely lead people to kill Chen Zong once Xiahou Zhen recovers. Chen Zong would have no way out. He would be pursued by the Xiahou lineage either way, so he might as well kill Xiahou Zhen. Another person sneered. Different people often had different views on the same matter. However, it was undeniable that this person's opinion was very reasonable. With Xiahou Zhen's character, even if Chen Zong did not kill him, Chen Zong would still be pursued by the Xiahou lineage. In that case, it was better to eliminate Xiahou Zhen and have one less enemy. Inside the City Logistics Division. Indeed, the power Chen Zong used at the end was a minor true intent. Based on his aura, it should be the two minor true intents of the sword. He is very proficient in using them. It's unlikely that he has just gained insight into them. He has already grasped them for some time. A guard said with a heavy expression. This Chen Zong does not look to be more than 30 years old. He is at the true martial realm, but he has already grasped two minor true intents. His talent far exceeds the likes of Xiahou Zhen. After this battle, this child will replace Xiahou Zhen's ranking on the minor heaven ascension roll. I wonder if we can recruit this child into our city logistics division? It's not that easy to recruit such a genius. Let's report this matter to the division chief. He'll make a decision. Very quickly, everyone's suggestions were passed to the head of the city logistics division. You don't have to worry about this. In the beginning, he'd naturally wanted to recruit this kid for the city supplies division, but the Marshal St. Palace's Xiahou branch had already sent people to come to a secret agreement. The guards felt that it was a pity, but there was nothing they could do. At this moment, the atmosphere in the sacred Marshal Palace's stronghold was cold and solemn. Ah Zhen, I will avenge you. Xiahou Ba personally placed Xiahou Zhen's corpse in the coffin. His expression was extremely gloomy as he said with a hoarse and obscure voice, I will behead him as a tribute to you. Ah Zhen is a core disciple of our Marshal St. Palace. Now that he's been killed, we must avenge him. Xiahou Ba turned around and swept his gaze across. His killing intent was sharp. If anyone has the chance, they must capture Chen Zong alive. Senior brother Xiahou, don't worry. If there's even the slightest chance, I'll definitely take down Chen Zong. Everyone expressed their stance. Xiahou Zhen was killed in the life and death arena. Who can he blame for being inferior? Xian Zai sneered inwardly. However, he did not say it out loud to make himself feel uncomfortable. Despite his laughter, Xian Zai knew very well that the Xiahou branch was completely enraged. They had sworn to kill Chen Zong. Even he would not be able to protect Chen Zong. Xian Zai could not help but feel a little regretful. However, he sneered. If such a genius could not be used by him, he could just die. This chapter is not finished. Please turn the page. However, Xiahou Ba's double dragon token was quite valuable. The life and death battle stirred up a storm. The entire Heaven Ascension city bustled with activity because of the battle. Chen Zong had already returned to the inn. He closed the door and took out Xiahou Zhen's mustard seed bag and other items. As a core disciple of the Sacred Martial Palace and a member of the Minor Heaven Ascension Roll, Xiahou Zhen's mustard seed bag contained quite a number of good items. There were more than 1,000 spirit shellfish, which was used for his daily expenses. As for the substandard spirit origins, there were more than 100. It was quite a sizable fortune. There were also some healing pills that were more effective than Chen Zong's own. They were clearly superior grade heaven-ranked pills. The pair of golden lightning patterned gloves that had reached the level of a grade 3 pseudo-spirit artifact was also quite valuable. However, the most valuable item was the double dragon token. Love go little say W, chew a protective treasure. Chen Zong took out the double dragon token and scrutinized it carefully. The craftsmanship was exquisite and it gave off a natural feeling. It was evident that the person who made the treasure was extremely skilled and had a profound cultivation realm. As he held the double dragon token in his hand, Chen Zong could vaguely sense a powerful force contained within it. If that force were to be fully unleashed, he would not be able to do anything even if he unleashed his full strength. Unfortunately, the double dragon token belonged to Xiahou Ba. It had long been refined by him. Chen Zong was unable to truly take it for himself. Furthermore, without Xiahou Ba's control, Chen Zong was unable to use any of the token's power. He could only temporarily put it away. At that moment, Wang Yunyu, who was standing beside Xian Zai, came looking for him. His goal was not to recruit Chen Zong, but for the double dragon token. The double dragon token belongs to Xiahou Ba. Unless you can remove Xiahou Ba's brand, you will not be able to use any of its power. It's better to sell it, Wang Yunyu said frankly. It might not be difficult to refine an ownerless artifact. At most, it would take some time. However, if one wanted to remove the brand, they would need a corresponding method or some unique secret method. Relying on brute force to break it would only damage the artifact itself, reduce its power, and even destroy its internal structure. How much? Chen Zong's answer was extremely simple. The double dragon token was good, but unfortunately, he could not use it. If he could sell it for a sum of money, it would not be bad, but the prerequisite was that the other party would be willing to pay. 20. Wang Yunyu stretched out 2 fingers and smiled contentedly. 20 mid-rank spirit sources. Good. Chen Zong said directly. Wang Yunyu's face suddenly froze, and the veins on his forehead bulged. If it were not for the fact that he was weaker than Chen Zong, he would have grabbed Chen Zong's collar and questioned him. Although artifacts were valuable, the double dragon token was only the lowest grade artifact. It was not worth 20 mid-rank spirit sources. 20 low-rank spirit sources, Wang Yunyu said word by word. Go ahead. Chen Zong was not polite at all. Although the double dragon token was only the lowest grade artifact, people would still want it if it was sold for 100 low-rank spirit sources. Of course, that was for ownerless artifact. You have to consider this carefully. Apart from me, who else would risk offending Xiahou Ba to buy this supreme twin dragon token? Although 20 low-grade spiritual sources are not worth the price of the supreme twin dragon token, it's better than nothing. After all, you can't use them. Wang Yunyu said clearly. That's my business. Chen Zong said. To be honest, 20 low-rank spirit sources were nothing in Chen Zong's eyes. You're on your own. Wang Yunyu was a little annoyed, but he did not dare to do anything. He turned around and left. This chapter is not finished. Please turn the page. Not long after Wang Yunyu left, someone knocked on the door again, which made Chen Zong frown. When the door opened, he saw 2 people standing outside, a man and a woman who looked to be in their 40s. They looked at Chen Zong with smiles. Although the 2 people's auras were restrained, Chen Zong was still keenly aware of the fluctuations of their auras. It was a kind of high and mighty aura that had surpassed a certain level. Transcendent realm. He did not know the other party's true cultivation, but he was sure that they were both transcendent realm masters. Chen Zong greets 2 seniors. This junior is honored to have 2 seniors here. Chen Zong first cupped his fists and bowed. This junior does not know the 2 seniors, but may I know why 2 seniors have come looking for me? Little friend, can you show us your 2 swords? The middle-aged scholar asked with a smile, but his eyes fell on the heavenly sun sword. Hearing this, Chunzong's heart suddenly moved. He took out the swords and handed them to the two people. In fact, if they wanted to snatch the swords, Chunzong would not be able to keep them. Furthermore, Chunzong had already guessed the identity of the two people. The middle-aged scholar and his wife pulled out the swords together. Their gazes fell on the swords and became gentle. Their fingers gently brushed the swords, as if they were treating their own children. Immediately after, the two of them sheathed the swords and handed them back to Chunzong. "Seniors, are you the yin-yang profound sword couple?" Chunzong asked after receiving the swords. "That's us," the middle-aged scholar said with a smile. "Originally, we were worried that these swords would not find a suitable master. However, after watching your battle with Xiaohozhen, we know that they have found a good master." The middle-aged woman chuckled softly. "I only hope that you will treat them well. My swords are like friends," Chunzong said solemnly. Although it was not a matter of whether the sword lived or died, as long as it was a sword that he used, he would treasure it very much. Of course, if he had a better sword, Chunzong would not be stuck with his original sword. This was a very simple principle. It was the same even for a transcendent realm expert. If a transcendent realm expert originally used a low-grade spirit sword and obtained a mid-grade spirit sword, he would naturally not rigidly refuse to use the mid-grade spirit sword. "Little friend Chunzong, today you killed Xiaohozhen on the life and death arena. I'm afraid there will be endless trouble in the future," the middle-aged scholar said. Generally speaking, it was taboo to talk too much with someone who did not know each other. The yin-yang profound sword and Chunzong did not have any friendship. However, the middle-aged scholar said so because of the heavenly yang sword and earth yin sword, as well as the importance and fondness he had for a junior like Chunzong. The martial Saint Palace's Xiaoho lineage has many branches and leaves. One sect with 3 rankings is even famous in the Heaven Ascension rankings. Now that Xiaohozhen is dead, his grandfather, Xiaoho Yuan, is extremely protective of him. He himself is an 8th-layer extreme mortal realm expert. In addition, the Xiaoho lineage also has many extreme mortal realm experts. If any one of them is sent, it will be a huge problem. "Little friend, you're here for the Sky Ascension Tower, right? Challenge the tower first. After you're done with the Sky Ascension Tower, if you want to leave Ascension City, you can let us know. My husband and I will send you out of Ascension City." Whether it was the Yang Profound Sword or the Yin Profound Sword, the two of them had solemn expressions. Chunzong, on the other hand, was surprised and immediately felt grateful. The martial Saint Palace was a high-rank sect. It was powerful and had a deep foundation. The Xiaoho lineage was one of its main forces. On the other hand, the yin-yang profound sword couple had just broken through to the extreme mortal realm not long ago. Moreover, they were loose cultivators. They were weak and alone in front of the martial Saint Palace. They actually wanted to help Chunzong. Although it was not a direct confrontation with the martial Saint Palace, their actions would undoubtedly offend the martial Saint Palace. End of chapter. Chapter 596. Sensing the goodwill of the yin-yang mysterious swords, Chunzong felt grateful. The two of them conversed. The yin-yang mysterious swords cultivated the sword, and so did Chunzong. Therefore, the yin-yang mysterious swords couple intended to give Chunzong some pointers. They shared their understanding of the sword during the conversation. After that, they also discovered that Chunzong's understanding of the sword was not only profound to the point that it surprised them, but it was also unique and actually had a certain inspiration effect on them. If the two of them had thought highly of Chunzong previously because of the Heavenly Sun sword and Earth Yin sword, then now they truly valued him. If such a genius with extraordinary talent in the sword were to mature, he would definitely shine brightly on the path of the sword. The yin-yang mysterious swords only left after a few hours of discussion. After Chunzong rested for a while, He slowly sorted out the yin-yang mysterious sword's insights into the sword and turned them into his own. This would help him create his own unique move, but more importantly, it would deepen his accumulation on the path of the sword. When Chernzong leaves Ascending Heaven City, we won't need to do anything. He's dead for sure. The three pseudo-transcendents of the Nangong family said one after another. After Xian Wuxing of the Xian family arrived at Ascending Heaven City, he immediately learned that Chernzong had killed Xiaozhen on the life and death arena. However, he was waiting for an opportunity. He was waiting for Chernzong to leave Ascending Heaven City to kill him, because he wanted to bring Chernzong's head back. The Martial Saint Palace's Xiahou lineage sent 2 paramount mortal realm experts to Ascending Heaven City. They entered the Martial Saint Palace's stronghold and paid attention to Chernzong's movements. Once Chernzong left Ascending Heaven City, they would immediately take action. They would not give Chernzong any chance to escape. In an instant, Chernzong became the focus of attention in the dark. During this period of time, Chernzong rarely went out and basically stayed in the inn to cultivate. In his battle with Xiaozhen, Chernzong had already fully grasped the fusion of 60% of his physical strength and 60% of his Overwatch Great True Force. Now, he was beginning to fuse 70%. The improvement in his sword art was very minute, but he had more ideas for his ultimate move. Chernzong had a feeling that he would be able to complete the first move of the Overwatch sword cannon in a month or 3 months if he was fast. However, Xiaoba did not come to ask for the Double Dragon Supreme token. He probably wanted to take it back after killing Chernzong. Time flew by. In the blink of an eye, it was time for the Heaven Ascension Tower to open. While the sky was still hazy, the entire Ascending Sky City was abnormally awake. It was as bustling as a market. Many warriors walked out of their rooms and headed towards the same destination as if they were going to the market. Sky Tower today was the day the Heaven Ascension Tower would open once a year for half a month. In theory, as long as one was not a transcendent, anyone was eligible to enter the Heaven Ascension Tower until its opening ended. Typically, those who wanted to challenge the Heaven Ascension Tower would enter Ascending Sky City early to prevent any accidents from happening. The crowd surged towards the center of the city, heading straight for the Heaven Ascension Tower. Chernzong was among the crowd, accompanied by the yin-yang profound sword couple. The two of them were naturally not here to challenge the Heaven Ascension Tower, but to a certain extent, to protect Chernzong. Who knew if someone would suddenly attack when there were so many people? With the Heaven Ascension Tower as the center, no one was allowed to step within a kilometer of it. Only with permission could one enter. Otherwise, rushing around would only cause unnecessary chaos. The Heaven Ascension Tower did not have a door. It was completely black, and it was impossible to tell what it was made of. It gave off an ancient aura as it stood above the ground, like a pillar that supported the heavens. It was majestic and unparalleled. The people of Ascending Sky City's city guards had already arrived. A guard swept his gaze over the crowd and said loudly, "It's time for the Heaven Ascension Tower to open once a year. I know that many people want to challenge the Heaven Ascension Tower, but time is limited and the Heaven Ascension Tower itself has a limit on the number of people who can enter. It is impossible to satisfy everyone." No one showed any surprise. Obviously, they were already aware of this. Chernzong also knew that the Heaven Ascension Tower was only open for half a month. This was not a decision made by Ascending Sky City, but rather a restriction of the Heaven Ascension Tower itself. Moreover, the Heaven Ascension Tower had 11 floors, and only 11 people could enter the Heaven Ascension Tower at a time. Only when the 11 people were not on the first floor could the second batch of people enter. Simply put, each floor of the Heaven Ascension Tower could only accommodate 11 people at a time. With all these conditions and restrictions, it was destined that not everyone could challenge the Heaven Ascension Tower. The way to choose was also very simple: survival of the fittest. There was a strength limit to challenging the Heaven Ascension Tower, which was below the Transcendent Realm. Generally, only the true Martial Realm and Pseudo-Transcendence could challenge it. Secondly, there was an age limit, which was a condition agreed upon by the other forces led by Ascending Sky City. Pseudo-Transcendence could not be more than 50 years old, and true Martial Realm cultivators could not be more than 30 years old. In a sense, this was a protective strategy. The first goal of challenging the Heaven Ascension Tower was to use the power inside to temper oneself. The second goal was to obtain the treasures inside the Heaven Ascension Tower. For many people, the first goal was incidental. The second goal was more important because there were treasures inside the Heaven Ascension Tower that were difficult to find in the outside world. For example, Xiahou Ba's Supreme Dual Dragon token was difficult to find in the outside world, but it was obtained when challenging the Heaven Ascension Tower. No one knew how many rewards there were in the Heaven Ascension Tower, whether it was inexhaustible or there was a limit to the number. However, the common guess was that it was the latter, which was why there was a limit. Cultivators ranked on the Minor Heaven Ascension list and Heaven Ascension list naturally did not need to be restricted. They completely met the conditions. As for Pseudo-Transcendents, who were not ranked on the Heaven Ascension list but were under 50 years old, they were also qualified to challenge the Heaven Ascension Tower. As for true Martial Realm cultivators, they had to be selected. The selection method was also very simple. It was a combat test. However, the combat test required quite a bit of time. Therefore, the test was completed before the Heaven Ascension Tower opened. Chen Zong did not need to undergo the test because he had killed Xiahou Zhen on the life and death platform. He had replaced Xiahou Zhen's ranking on the Minor Heaven Ascension list. The Minor Heaven Ascension list had 72 rankings. Xiahou Zhen was ranked 13th and now, the 13th place was taken by Rampaging Sword Chen Zong. Everyone who can challenge the Heaven Ascension Tower, come forward. The guard announced. Immediately, one person after another walked out from the crowd and stepped into the 1,000-meter radius of the Heaven Ascension Tower. Chen Zong was also one of them. At a glance, there were about 300 people who wanted to challenge the Heaven Ascension Tower. It was not a small number. Furthermore, there would be more people rushing over. According to the past, there would be at least 1,000 people challenging the Heaven Ascension Tower in half a month. These 1,000 people were qualified. They were chosen from the many people who wanted to challenge the Heaven Ascension Tower. Now that the Heaven Ascension Tower has opened, according to the past rules, the people on the Heaven Ascension list will be the first to challenge it. Remember, no external help is allowed. The City Guard's Division's guard said. No one objected. This practice had been going on for many years. The Heaven Ascension list had fewer spots than the Minor Heaven Ascension list. There were only 36 spots. Those who could be ranked on the Heaven Ascension list had combat strength that was at least at the beginning of the 8-star realm. However, not everyone on the list would rush to challenge the Heaven Ascension Tower. After all, the Heaven Ascension Tower only opened once a year. Some people had already left the Heaven Ascension domain to explore other domains. Typically, they would not rush back just for the Heaven Ascension Tower. As for others, they were cultivating in seclusion. Therefore, there were only 9 people on the Heaven Ascension list. As for the 72 people on the Minor Heaven Ascension list, not all of them had arrived. At the very least, those who were ranked near the top did not appear. The Heaven Ascension Tower was not the only opportunity in the world. Only 28 people on the Minor Heaven Ascension list came. The Heaven Ascension list was usually the first to challenge the Heaven Ascension Tower, followed by the Minor Heaven Ascension list, followed by the Pseudo-Transcendents under the age of 50, and finally the true Martial Realm that had passed the combat strength test. Now, only 9 people on the Heaven Ascension list had arrived. There were still 2 spots left. Naturally, the people on the Minor Heaven Ascension list would fill the gap. The order of entry was based on the ranking on the list. There were not many people in the top 10 of the minor heaven ascension list. There was only one, Sky Crane Hand Songbai, who was ranked 8. Next was Wind Cloud Kick Lu Jingxiong, who was ranked 11. Finally, it was Chen Zong, who had replaced Xiahou Zhen. The first batch of people to enter the Heaven Ascension Tower was the 9 people on the Heaven Ascension list, Sky Crane Hand Songbai and Wind Cloud Kick Lu Jingxiong. There were 11 of them. Xiahou Ba's expression was gloomy. His killing intent burned as he stared at Chen Zong. It was as if he wanted to kill Chen Zong through his gaze. Chen Zong met Xiahou Ba's gaze without fear. If he wanted to, Chen Zong would have already become a pseudo-transcendent realm cultivator. His combat strength would have soared to the level of an 8-star. After all, Chen Zong's accumulation of cultivation far surpassed that of many people. His combat strength would not be inferior to Xiahou Ba's, and might even be superior. However, Chen Zong had restrained his cultivation from breaking through to the true martial realm, which he had no clue about. As such, what did Xiahou Ba have to fear? However, there was another gaze that made Chen Zong feel uncomfortable. Following the gaze, Chen Zong saw a blue-clothed man. His face was pale, as if he had never been exposed to sunlight and had been in a dark place for many years. However, his eyes were frighteningly deep, like the eyes of a ghost. They carried an astonishing chill that made one's hair stand on end. This person was clearly standing there, but it was as if he did not exist. It was extremely strange. Compared to Xiahou Ba, this person was much more threatening. However, Chen Zong did not know. Had he offended this person before? Unable to figure it out, Chen Zong did not think too much about it. He would deal with whatever came his way. He did not like to take the initiative to find trouble, but if trouble came knocking on his door, he would not be afraid. He would fight when the time came. He would kill when the time came. That person was from the Xian family, a sword family, Xian Wuxing, who was known as the Ghost Sword. Xian Wuxing's purpose was naturally to kill Chen Zong and cut off Chen Zong's head to bring back. Coincidentally, the Heaven Ascension Tower had opened, so he wanted to give it a try and get some rewards before killing Chen Zong. The tower challenge began. The 9 people on the Heaven Ascension list and the 2 people on the Minor Heaven Ascension list walked forward and quickly approached the Heaven Ascension Tower. Then, they reached out and pressed on the wall of the first floor. This Heaven Ascension Tower was very interesting. It had 11 floors and 11 walls. Under an ancient and mysterious fluctuation, the 11 figures were instantly wrapped up. Then, under everyone's gaze, they directly entered the walls of the Tower of Ascension. When their figures all disappeared, the 11 walls of the first floor of the Tower of Ascension lit up with a soft light. It has begun. They are all top geniuses. I wonder how many floors they can reach. Chapter 597. The pitch-black Tower of Ascension was filled with people. All of them were staring at the light on the first level of the Tower of Ascension. No one thought that the first batch of people would fail on the first level. After all, those people were all geniuses on the Heaven Ascension list. They represented the most outstanding part of the younger generation in the Ascension Heaven region. They had also tried to enter the Tower of Ascension before. Not long after, one of the walls flashed continuously. It was as if someone had jumped directly to the second level. Someone has passed the first level. Looking at his position, it should be Ghost Sword Xian Wuxing. That's right, it's Brother Wuxing, the people of the Xian clan said proudly. Among the 9 people from the Heaven Ascension list, Xian Wuxing's ranking was the highest. He was ranked 4th, much higher than Xiahou Ba. Not long after, a second person passed the first level and stepped into the second level. The first batch of 11 people were all top geniuses. Challenging those of a higher level was as easy as eating and drinking. Therefore, in less than 15 minutes, all 11 of them stepped into the second level. The second batch of challengers, come forward, Si Wei's voice sounded. Another 11 people stepped into the Tower of Ascension. Chen Zong was among them. The second batch of challengers were all on the Minor Heaven Ascension list. Chen Zong's ranking was the highest. Walking in front of the Tower of Ascension, Chen Zong stretched out his left hand and pressed it on the wall of the Tower of Ascension. A trace of coldness spread through his palm, causing Chen Zong to involuntarily shiver. It was as if he had been doused with ice water. However, he did not feel cold at all. Instead, he felt refreshed. Immediately after, Chen Zong felt a suction force rapidly spread through his arm and spread throughout his body. He could not resist it at all. The wall seemed to become extremely soft, like mud. Chen Zong could clearly see his left palm quickly merging into it as if it was being devoured. Then, it was his arm. Soon, his entire body was swallowed. All he could see was darkness, but he did not feel suffocated at all. After what seemed like a long time, Chen Zong appeared in the Tower of Ascension in an instant. The Tower of Ascension had its own space. It was very magical. At a glance, Chen Zong did not see anyone else who had entered. These people had been separated into different spaces. Suddenly, the darkness was dispelled. Chen Zong could clearly see that he was in a wide circular room. The spiral ceiling seemed to be full of mysteries. A ray fell down and shone directly on Chen Zong's body. Limit of the 9th True Martial Realm, the limit. A stiff and cold voice rang out. The first sentence referred to Chen Zong's cultivation, while the second sentence referred to the time he could spend in the tower. He could only stay on each level for 2 hours at most. If he was unable to reach the next level within 2 hours, he would be considered to have failed the tower. As for the verification of one's cultivation, it was a prelude to the Tower of Ascension itself. After all, in addition to the true martial realm, there were also pseudo-transcendent. The true martial realm and pseudo-transcendence naturally had different levels of difficulty. Another ray of light fell and condensed into a figure out of thin air. At the same time, a huge water glass appeared in the corner of the room, dripping water continuously. It was a person holding a long saber. His whole body was pitch black, but his eyes were glowing red. The aura around him had reached the limit of the 9th true martial realm, not weak at all. As soon as this person appeared, he immediately took a step forward as fast as the wind. The long black saber broke through the air and slashed down from above. The saber light seemed to be able to split the earth. The full strength of this saber strike was amazing. It could instantly kill an ordinary 9th true martial realm cultivator. Chen Zong did not use his sword. With a snap of his fingers, sword chi broke through the air and pierced the figure's head, directly disappearing. Too weak. This figure's cultivation was at the limit of the 9th true martial realm, but his combat strength was not weak at all. The power of that saber strike was enough to make an early 4-star martial realm cultivator difficult to deal with. However, the gap between him and Chen Zong was still very obvious. But this also surprised Chen Zong. This kind of starting point seemed to be too high. He had to at least be an early 4-star martial realm cultivator. This was why many people were rejected. It was no wonder that Ascension City required a combat test before the tower was opened. In addition to other reasons, this difficulty was also a congenital condition. Simply put, if you were not a genius, you would not be able to enter the Tower of Ascension. Even if you had the chance, you would not gain the slightest benefit. It would be a waste of time. As the figure was shattered by Chen Zong's finger, 2 more rays of light immediately fell, condensing into 2 black figures out of thin air. Their aura fluctuations were still at the peak of the 9th level of the genuine martial realm. These 2 figures were also holding long black sabers. They immediately attacked Chen Zong from the left and right. Different from the previous figure, they did not use their full strength to attack. Instead, they used sharp saber techniques, which turned into saber shadows all over the sky and attacked Chen Zong. Chen Zong still did not draw his sword. He used his fingers instead of a sword, and after shattering the saber shadows, he defeated the two black figures at the same time. Soon, 4 black figures condensed and attacked Chen Zong with sabers in hand. The 4 people attacked from 4 directions. The saber light was either overbearing, sharp, or endless. The saber chi was chilling. The 4 figures' combat strength was at the early 4-star martial realm. At this time, they even had the momentum of a joint attack, which was more powerful than the 4 people's random attacks. Chen Zong still used his fingers instead of a sword to cut through all the saber light and saber chi. Then, he cut through the bodies of the 4 figures with unstoppable sharpness and defeated them again. Then, 8 black figures condensed around him and quickly moved around Chen Zong. Saber chi filled the air, like the roar of dragons and snakes. These 8 people still had the combat strength of the early 4-star martial realm, but the momentum of their joint attack was more obvious. The difference between the same combat strength and the joint attack was obvious. For example, 8 warriors of the same combat strength were fighting against one person, but they fought separately. In the end, they would be defeated one by one. However, if they were proficient in the joint attack, they could fully mobilize their strength to cover their weaknesses and make full use of their advantages. In this way, they could trap and even kill the opponent. However, the difference between the early 4-star martial realm and Chen Zong's combat strength was too big. They were easily defeated by Chen Zong. However, this was not the end. 16 figures condensed, and they all had the combat strength of the early 4-star martial realm. However, the 16 figures were different from before. They did not surround and attack Yi Futian directly. Instead, 2 of them took the lead, followed by 4 others and then 8 others. The last 2 suddenly appeared in the sky and struck down with their long sabers like lightning. This was another kind of joint attack. If it was an intermediate 4-star martial realm, he would definitely die facing such a joint attack. Even if it was an advanced 4-star martial realm, it would be difficult for him to gain any advantage. However, Chen Zong was not a 4-star martial realm. Facing such a joint attack, he would not panic. Instead, he dealt with it calmly. He waved his sword finger. It looked simple, but it contained amazing mysteries. It broke all the attacks directly like a breeze blowing through willows. Then, the 16 figures stopped in the air and dispersed. However, 32 figures condensed out of thin air. They were even faster. They pounced on Chen Zong from all directions with sabers in their hands. They were so dense that they covered the sky like dark clouds. The saber light was cold and the saber shadows were like rolling clouds. It was terrifying. Chen Zong frowned slightly. The difficulty of the first floor was too high. Of course, this did not apply to him. Whether it was 16 or 32 early 4-star martial realm, it did not make much of a difference to Chen Zong. However, it was different for most of the warriors. Chen Zong still did not draw his sword. He used his sword finger to perform a sword art. It was simple but sharp and mysterious. The 32 figures turned into 64. Kill, kill, kill. The 64 figures were all killed by Chen Zong. The first floor returned to its peaceful state immediately. Chen Zong looked at the waterspout in the corner of the wall. The waterspout was supposed to last for 2 hours, but only a small part of it had dripped. Not even 15 minutes had passed. You have successfully passed the tower. Do you want to enter the next floor? A cold and stiff voice sounded. After passing the tower, the warriors had a choice. They could either leave, enter the next floor, or enter the next floor when the time was up. Enter the next floor. Chen Zong replied. Although the difficulty of the first floor was not low, it was nothing for Chen Zong. It would not be a challenge for him. Of course, it was better to enter the next floor as soon as possible. After the voice sounded, a beam of light shone from the ceiling onto Chen Zong. Chen Zong felt an irresistible force that seemed to soar into the sky. Everything around him became distorted. There was no difference between the first floor and the second floor. No, there was a difference. It was time. The time limit of the second floor was 4 hours. Outside, when Chen Zong stepped from the first floor to the second floor, the corresponding wall flashed and he jumped from the first floor to the second floor. So fast! Who is that? Chen Zong, the sword of the unhindered. It's him. They were all surprised. Chen Zong was the fastest to pass the first floor and enter the second floor in the second bat. As expected of Brother Chen, Qin Chen smiled. He was also one of the challengers. However, he was not on the minor heaven ascension list, so he was still waiting. As for Mo Sen, he had defeated someone on the minor heaven ascension list and was now in the heaven ascension tower. The second floor was the same as the first floor. The first to appear was an opponent with a mid-stage 4-star battle strength. He held a long sword in his hand. The sword trembled slightly like a snake coming out of its hole. However, it carried a roaring sound as it slashed towards Chen Zong like a tearing storm. Chen Zong was slightly startled. He staggered and quickly dodged. With such battle strength, Chen Zong could naturally kill him with a finger. However, the sword technique that the opponent used was something he had never seen before. Moreover, it was quite exquisite. Chen Zong wanted to see more of it. After Chen Zong dodged the first sword, the black figure immediately slashed out a second sword. The wind roared, thunder roared, wind and thunder surged, and a terrifying sword chi wreaked havoc in all directions. Then there was the third sword. It was as if thousands of thunderbolts were destroying the earth. It struck down from the sky. Then, the fourth sword became the move of the first sword and was repeatedly used. After a few times, Chen Zong basically understood the mystery of this sword technique. He slashed with his sword finger and directly used the first sword. It was like a snake coming out of its hole. However, it carried a roaring sound as it broke through the air and attacked the black figure. The same sword technique in the hands of different people would often be different. Chapter 598. Please subscribe. If you like this book, please support the official subscription. Accumulation was indispensable to a warrior's cultivation. Only with enough accumulation and precipitation could one transform. Chen Zong was determined to practice the sword, so his accumulation was mainly based on the sword. Maybe some sword techniques were different for him, but they could help him understand the sword. The more, the better. The unknown sword technique that Chen Zong learned from the Black Shadow should be of the highest quality of the heaven level based on his experience and insight. It was very mysterious and had the mystery of wind and thunder in it. It was indeed extraordinary. 2 black shadows appeared, wielding black longswords. They displayed their swordsmanship and attacked Chen Zong. Like 2 spiritual snakes coming out of their caves, they roared with gang qi. Their momentum was extraordinary. Chen Zong's expression remained unchanged, and his finger pierced forward like a sword in a carefree manner. It was like a spirit snake leaving its hole, nimble, light, and extraordinarily swift, yet it also emitted a shocking thunderous roar. It was easy for Chen Zong to get rid of these 2 people with his strength, but he didn't do that. Instead, he used them to practice his sword. Chen Zong kept performing the first sword of the unknown sword technique. He practiced it again and again, and his mastery of it became more and more profound. He stabbed out with his finger again. It was as if there was a snake slithering in the air. Its flexible body quickly rushed out of the hole. Its body was not big, but it was like a flood dragon coming out of the abyss. It carried a shocking momentum and roared out like thunder. The appearance of a phenomenon in a single sword strike was obviously a sign that one had cultivated the sword technique to an extremely profound level. It represented that Chen Zong had already grasped the essence and profundities of this sword strike and had fused it with his own understanding, causing it to be more suitable for him to execute. Wherever the sword passed, the swordsmanship of the 2 men was directly destroyed. Then, even their bodies were destroyed. 2 turned into 4, and after they were defeated, they turned into 8, then 16, then 32, and finally 64. The pressure brought by 64 mid-stage 4-star warriors was not small at all, but Chen Zong still defeated them all. During this process, Chen Zong also completely mastered the unknown sword technique. However, Chen Zong became the last person in the second batch to step into the third level because he practiced that sword technique. What happened? Probably because it's my first time challenging the Heaven Ascension Tower. In the end, it's still about strength. At this moment, the highest level of the tower was the 5th level, and the lowest level was the 1st level. The opponents on the 3rd floor were even stronger. They were at the later stage of the 4-star level, and their weapon was a long spear. The spear was like a dragon, and when it was blasted out, it was like a flood dragon emerging from the sea. When the 64 of them attacked together with their spears, the momentum was extremely shocking. It was as if 64 dragons were roaring and attacking at the same time, shocking the world with their movements. Facing such an attack, Chen Zong was indeed shocked. He could also feel the shocking pressure. If it was an ordinary 5-star warrior at the beginning stage, it would probably be difficult to deal with it. Chen Zong pointed his sword forward, and there seemed to be lightning blooming at the tip of his finger. It was as if thunder broke through the sky, and as if it was a thunderbolt, it caused the void to shake, and it majestically shattered all the attacks. The opponents on the 4th floor were at the peak of the 4-star level. The opponents on the 5th floor were at the peak of the 4-star level. The opponents on the 6th floor were at the beginning stage of the 5-star level. Time flew by, and batches of people entered the Heaven Ascension Tower. At the same time, there were also people who failed and were sent out. When Chen Zong stepped into the 6th floor, Xin Wuxing, who had challenged the highest level of the tower, had already reached the 8th floor. The higher the level of the Heaven Ascension Tower, the more difficult it would be because the opponent's strength would become stronger. The first opponent on the 6th floor was quickly defeated by Chen Zong. Then, there were 2 opponents, 4 opponents, 8 opponents, 16 opponents, 32 opponents, 64 opponents. When Chen Zong faced 64 opponents, he pulled out the Heaven Sun Sword and the Earth Yin Sword, and performed the prototype of the Zongheng Sword Codex's unique skill. Fight, fight, fight. The saber radiance was like a blazing sun, and it slashed down from the sky. It was as if 64 blazing suns were emitting a terrifying heat that seemed to burn the entire void into ashes. Chen Zong's expression was cold. His 2 swords slashed out countless cross-shaped sword radiances, shattering the blazing saber radiances and shattering the figures. However, Chen Zong was unable to step into the 7th floor at the moment, because there were exactly 11 people on the 7th floor, and he had to wait. The higher the floor, the longer the time limit. For example, the 2nd floor's time limit was 4 hours, and the 3rd floor's time limit was 6 hours, and so on. While waiting, Chen Zong continued studying the Sword Codex's unique skill, slowly perfecting it. Soon 2 hours were up. Those who had failed to clear the 7th floor were sent out of the Heaven Ascension Tower. Chen Zong's figure also appeared on the 7th floor at the same time. The opponents on the 7th floor were even stronger, with mid-stage 5-star combat strength. 1 or 2 of them were not difficult for Chen Zong, but when there were 32 of them, their combined strength put a certain amount of pressure on Chen Zong. The pressure brought by the 64 opponents was even greater. To Chen Zong, having sufficient pressure was a good thing. Chen Zong should have reached the 7th floor, right? It's not bad for him to reach the 7th floor on his first attempt at the Heaven Ascension Tower. Xiahou Zhen reached the 8th floor last year. Chen Zong is stronger than Xiahou Zhen, so reaching the 7th floor isn't a big deal. There was plenty of time for 2 hours to clear the 1st floor, but as the floors went up, the opponents became stronger. The 2 hours gradually became tight. Slashing out with his 2 swords and vanquishing a figure, Chen Zong had to face the attacks of the other figures. It was as though everything was under his control. He shifted his feet and twisted his body, shuttling through the flowers like a butterfly. He was light and elegant as he dodged one attack after another. His two swords tore through the air like lightning, unhindered and domineering. One opponent after another was vanquished. Finally, all the opponents were vanquished by Chen Zong's two swords. The next floor was the 8th floor, but there were still people challenging the 8th floor. Chen Zong could only wait. "I wonder which floor my young friend can reach?" Yang Xianjian said with a smile. "The 9th floor shouldn't be a problem," Yin Xianjian said with a smile. The two of them had seen the battle between Chen Zong and Xiahozhen. They knew that Chen Zong's combat strength was very strong. Later, they conversed with him and knew that Chen Zong had a unique understanding of the Tao of the sword. With such a combination, it was certain that he could reach the 9th floor. To date, the 9th floor was the record for the highest tower challenge in the past 100 years. Chen Zong was completely immersed in his meditations, and in the corner of the wall, water constantly dripped down, indicating the passage of time. Chen Zong, who was immersed in his meditations, did not notice the last drop of water dripping down. Immediately, an irresistible force enveloped Chen Zong. Chen Zong disappeared from the 7th floor and appeared on the 8th floor. In the beginning, people outside could more or less tell what floor someone had reached. But as more and more people challenged the tower, and people were sent out after failing, it was difficult to judge from the light on the Sky Ascension Pagoda's walls. "Someone has reached the 9th floor. Who is it?" "It should be Phantom Sword Xin Wuxing. Among the people challenging the tower, he is the strongest." This view was agreed upon by most people, but there were a number of people who disagreed. They believed that it was someone else. The opponent on the 8th floor had a late-stage 5-star combat strength and was easily killed by Chen Zong. However, when the number of opponents increased to 32, Chen Zong felt the pressure increase significantly. 32 late-stage 5-star warriors working together was enough to defeat an ordinary peak 5-star warrior. Only a powerful peak 5-star warrior or a 6-star warrior with combat strength that exceeded 5 stars could defeat them. When the number of late-stage 5-star warriors reached 64 and they worked together in an orderly manner, the terrifying strength was enough to kill any peak 5-star warrior. Back then, Xiahozhen had been defeated by this. Chen Zong was not Xiahozhen. He was much stronger than Xiahozhen, especially when his physical strength and unhindered true force had fused to 70%. In terms of strength, it was equivalent to 14% of his previous strength. This had already exceeded the limits of 5 stars and had truly stepped into the early stages of 6 stars. If he were to fight Xiahozhen again, Chen Zong would not need to use the wrath of wind and lightning. Fight, fight, fight. Chen Zong also used all his strength. His two swords were sometimes as violent as a tidal wave, sometimes as domineering as a dragon, sometimes as continuous as water, and sometimes as fast as the wind. Each strike was unstoppable. The 64-sword Dao sword flashes bloomed like the tail of a dragon sparrow. With Chen Zong at the center, it was as if radiance radiated in all directions. Under the 64 sword flashes, the 64 figures paused. Following that, they dissipated like smoke blown by a strong wind. Looking at the water hourglass, only 2 hours had passed. There were 14 hours left. However, there were only 2 people on the 9th floor. Chen Zong could easily enter directly, but he was in no hurry. Instead, he stayed on the 8th floor to meditate. He had gained something from the previous battle. Soon, 14 hours passed. Chen Zong was also meditating when he was sent to the 9th floor by the Sky Ascension Pagoda's powers. The further one went in the Sky Ascension Pagoda, the more difficult it became. Hence, before Chen Zong entered the 9th floor, only 2 people had stepped into the 9th floor. Another person has entered the 9th floor. Who could it be? It's hard to guess. There are many possibilities. Among the people who challenged the Sky Ascension Pagoda this time, there was no lack of top-notch geniuses. However, those who could make it to the 6th floor were already very good. Those who could make it to the 7th floor were considered quite powerful. Those who could make it to the 8th floor were the cream of the crop. The combat power of the opponents on the 9th floor increased again. They were at the peak of the 5-star level. However, 1 or 2 5-star peak opponents were still nothing to Chunzong. He could kill them easily. They did not have the slightest effect on him. 4. When the number of 5-star peak opponents reached 16, Chunzong began to feel the pressure. When the number of 5-star peak opponents reached 32, the pressure became more obvious. It was already stronger than the previous 64 5-star peak opponents. 64 5-star peak opponents appeared and surrounded Chunzong directly. When they attacked, every attack was shockingly powerful. The stronger the pressure brought by the opponents, the happier Chunzong was. Because the stronger the pressure, the more effective it was for him to train. Every time he passed a floor, his strength would be restored to its peak by the Sky Ascension Pagoda. Otherwise, Chunzong would not have been able to make it here. Chapter 599. The sword pierced through the air like a thunderbolt, yet it was also like a swallow flying back. As the sword swept past, it shattered everything. In the blink of an eye, countless rays of light with violent destruction bombarded from all directions, drowning Chunzong's figure. Xian Wuxing's sword was green with a chilling intent, as if it had been soaked in the river of hell for hundreds of years. Every time he slashed out, the sword's blade could not be seen, only a touch of chilling green. It was like the fog of hell, emitting a chilling light. It was like the eyes of an evil spirit, coldly and mercilessly devouring all life. Xian Wuxing's face was pale, and his eyes were dark. His figure was as mysterious as a sword, dodging all the attacks from all directions. Among the people who were challenging the Sky Tower, Xian Wuxing was ranked 4th on the Heaven Ascension list. He was undoubtedly strong. He was also the fastest to challenge the tower and the first to reach the 9th floor. However, the opponents of the pseudo-transcendent were different from those of the true martial realm. The opponents of the true martial realm were at the beginning of the 4-star level, while the opponents of the pseudo-transcendent were at the beginning of the 7-star level. Now that he had reached the 9th floor, the opponents that Xian Wuxing faced were all at the peak of the 8-star level. Xian Wuxing's combat strength was indeed amazing. He was ranked 4th on the Heaven Ascension list, and his combat strength had already reached the peak of the 8-star level. He was only one step away from becoming a 9-star master. An ordinary peak of the 8-star level would not be able to resist Xian Wuxing at all, and would be easily killed. However, when the number of peak of the 8-star level reached a certain level, the pressure that Xian Wuxing faced would increase tremendously. Under the joint attack of 16 peak of the 8-star level, Xian Wuxing could only perform his movement skill to dodge continuously. He wandered among the strong enemies, waiting for an opportunity to strike with his ghost sword and destroy them one by one. The 16 peak of the 8-star level strong enemies were defeated by Xian Wuxing one by one. However, the 32 opponents that appeared after that made Xian Wuxing's face turn solemn. Although he had tried his best to conserve his energy, he had consumed most of it during the battle. Soaring Crane. With a low shout, Sky Crane Hand Songbai's arms flapped like crane wings. His body soared into the sky like a white crane. He was as fast as lightning and as light as the wind, avoiding all the attacks from the 16 peak of the 5-star level strong enemies. Heavenly Crane 100 Pecs. While he was still in midair, he spread out his arms like the wings of a white crane, causing his body to pause in midair for a short moment. A strong force rushed towards his arms like a tide, but it was as light and agile as the wind. Amidst the whistling sounds, it was as if there were gusts of wind blowing, circling around Songbai's body. His arms trembled slightly, transforming into countless afterimages, like a pair of wings spread out from feathers. Then, both his hands pinched together with his index finger, middle finger, and thumb, like the sharp beak of a white crane. Countless chi revolved and surged, blossoming with an astonishing cold light. In an instant, it exploded, continuously pecking at the strong enemies below. Accompanied by the sharp cries of cranes, the arms disappeared. Only the hundreds of cranes' beaks descended. It was as if there were hundreds of white cranes' heads that were driving their sharp beaks to peck at their prey in an instant, shattering the air like cotton. On the 8th floor, Xiahou Ba used one palm technique and the other fist technique. He unleashed a flurry of attacks. Qing Chen had also made it to the 8th floor, and was currently fighting with the last 64 strong enemies on the 8th floor. His fingers, palms, and fists were all in one hand. Not only were they flexible, but they were also extremely powerful. Every attack brought about layers of afterimages, which was extremely mysterious. Qing Chen's expression was calm, as if he did not feel any pressure at all. But in reality, the pressure from the 64 late-stage 5-star strong enemies was very obvious. Even so, Qing Chen still defeated the 64 strong enemies one by one and made it to the 9th floor. Another person has made it to the 9th floor. Who is it? It caused another commotion in the outside world. The 9th floor was the current record for the tower. Since ancient times, there had been too few people who had made it to the 9th floor every time. On the 8th floor, Emo-san held his long saber. The saber light spilled out, and it was extremely sharp. I have completely grasped 70% of the sword energy. So, I can kill them all. Chen Zong thought to himself. His eyes were like the tip of a sword, and a cold light flashed past. The two swords pierced through the air, and the sword light flowed continuously like water. Every sword attack was extremely powerful, and it was extremely domineering and sharp. The sword light in the shape of a cross seemed to be imprinted in the air, and it seemed to be stagnant. Then, it burst out at an astonishing speed, and it was unavoidable. Break, break. One by one, the opponents were defeated by Chen Zong's two swords. There were less than 10 of the 64 peak 5-star strong enemies left. However, Chen Zong had also used up a lot of his power. He only had 30% of his power left, but it was enough to kill the remaining 10 opponents. Kill, kill, kill. As expected, the remaining opponents were all defeated. Looking at the water clock, there were still a few hours left. Chen Zong sat down with his legs crossed, but he did not recover his power. Because when he entered the 10th floor, his power would be restored to the peak by the sky tower. Therefore, the most important thing now was to comprehend. The battle just now had brought Chen Zong a lot of training, especially in the interpretation of his unique skills. It was more efficient than comprehending by himself. In addition, the cultivation of the second change of mind could integrate 80% of his power. Once he started comprehending, he did not know how much time had passed. Soon, the last drop of water fell, and Chen Zong's body was enveloped by an irresistible power. That power wrapped Chen Zong's body and entered Chen Zong's body at the same time, causing Chen Zong's consumed power to recover rapidly. In the outside world, everyone was staring at the sky tower, whether it was the 6th, 7th, 8th, or 9th floor. Suddenly, one of the 4 glowing walls on the 9th floor flickered rapidly. Instantly, everyone's eyes were attracted to it. As the light flickered, it quickly dimmed, and a figure seemed to be squeezed out, appearing outside the wall and falling down. Phantom Sword Exhilarating whooshing. He is indeed one of the people who made it to the 4th floor. He still couldn't pass the 9th floor and enter the 10th floor. I wonder what kind of reward he got? While everyone was discussing, Phantom Sword Exhilarating whooshing left the sky tower and walked to the Exhilarating family. Everyone knew that one would be rewarded for passing the sky tower. Simply put, as long as one passed the 1st floor and entered the 2nd floor, even if they failed the 2nd floor, they would still be rewarded. Of course, the higher the floor, the better the reward. Basically, the reward for passing the first 3 floors was relatively ordinary. Only the reward for passing the 4th floor was more valuable. Furthermore, the first time one entered the Heaven Ascension Pagoda, the rewards obtained were usually better. If it was the second time, unless one could break the record of the first time, the rewards obtained would be slightly inferior, and the third time would be even worse. This was the third time Ghost Sword Xian Wuxing had entered the Heaven Ascension Tower. Every time, he had reached the 8th floor and obtained a decent reward. The second time, he had reached the 9th floor. However, he had been defeated by 16 powerful enemies. The third time, he had been defeated by 64 powerful enemies. Therefore, the reward he had obtained this time was inferior to the reward he had obtained in the second time. Not long after, several walls on the 8th floor flickered continuously, and figures were squeezed out. Xiaoba was among them. This was also the third time Xiaoba had passed the Sky Tower. Unfortunately, the first time he reached the 7th floor, the second time he reached the 8th floor, and now he was still at the 8th floor. Almost there. Xiaoba was annoyed. Compared to the previous 2 times, he had improved. Unfortunately, he still couldn't pass the 8th floor and enter the 9th floor. The second time he reached the 8th floor, his reward was the Supreme Double Dragon token. If he could reach the 9th floor, his reward would be even better. But now that he had failed the Sky Tower, he would have to wait until next year if he wanted to try again. Xiaoba glanced around and didn't see Chenzong. He immediately asked the people of the Martial Saint Palace and learned that Chenzong was still in the Sky Tower. According to the time, this Chenzong has probably reached the 8th floor. Xiaoba secretly guessed. He even came up with a guess that he didn't want to believe. The 9th floor. It didn't matter if Chenzong reached the 9th floor or not. In short, if there was a chance, he would kill him even if he had to pay a certain price. At this moment, another wall flickered on the 9th floor. Is someone coming out again? Who could it be? Everyone stared at the wall and guessed. But when they opened their eyes wide, they didn't see anyone being squeezed out of the wall. The 10th floor has lit up. A resounding voice pierced through the air, causing everyone to be dumbfounded. The 10th floor had lit up. What did that mean? It meant that someone had passed the 9th floor and entered the 10th floor. Since ancient times, no one had ever entered the 10th floor. Who is it? Who made it to the 10th floor? For a moment, everyone was alarmed. Even the transcendents were not spared. Could it be little friend? Yang Xianjian asked Yin Xianjian. I'm not sure. Yin Xianjian shook his head. The 10th floor. It's just the 10th floor, not the 11th floor. Someone was angry. No one has reached the 10th floor in the past 100 years. Not only is it a record, it will also be passed down through the ages. What a joke. If the top 3 of the Minor Heaven Ascension list or the top 3 of the Heaven Ascension list come again, they will definitely be able to reach the 10th floor. That makes sense. As far as I know, the top 3 of the Minor Heaven Ascension list and the top 3 of the Heaven Ascension list have left the Heaven Ascension region to gain experience in other regions after reaching the 9th floor. They haven't returned yet. Someone analyzed. Ghost Sword Xian Wuxing reached the 8th level 2 years ago and is now at the 9th level. If the top 3 on the list come to challenge the Heaven Ascension Tower, there is at least an 80% chance of passing the 9th level and reaching the 10th level. The top 3 of every list were usually the strongest. Listening to this person's analysis, the shock of reaching the 10th floor lessened a lot. After all, it wasn't that no one had reached the 10th floor before, at least 100 years ago. It was just that no one had reached the 10th floor in the past 100 years. But now, after some analysis, it seemed that there was more than one person who could reach the 10th floor. It was just that those people hadn't returned yet. No matter what they thought, Chenzong reaching the 10th floor was a fact. The difference between the 10th floor and the first 9 floors was the opponent's combat power and time limit. The first opponent appeared with peak 5-star combat power, and the time limit was 20 hours. Chapter 600. The Black Shadow stood in front of Chen Zong with a sword in his hand. His footsteps were small and hurried, and he approached Chen Zong like a flash of lightning. His body swayed with his footsteps, and countless afterimages appeared around him. It was as if countless people were charging at him with swords at the same time. His aura was so sharp and cold that it chilled people to the bone, as if they had fallen into an ice cellar. The sword light was restrained, and it became limitless as the figure swayed. It was impossible to tell where the sword would come from. It was so mysterious. At first glance, Chen Zong could tell that this sword technique was very exquisite, far better than the one he had learned before. The technique was drawn but not released, but its aura was extremely sharp. As it approached, it kept increasing until it was close to Zong Zong, and it exploded with all its power. It was extremely terrifying. When the Black Shadow was 3 meters away from Chen Zong, countless figures and countless sword shadows gathered in an instant. It was as if the power of countless swords was integrated into this sword at the same time. It was like a falling meteorite, and the terrifying aura made Chen Zong's expression change slightly. A mere peak 5-star combat strength was naturally no threat to Chen Zong, but the power of this sword was really amazing. Moreover, this was only the first opponent. According to the rules of the Sky-Reaching Tower, after the first opponent was defeated, there would be 2, 4, 8 until 64 opponents. Thinking that he would face so many powerful opponents in the future, Chen Zong was excited but also had a tingling feeling on his scalp. He attacked with his sword, and it directly collided with the opponent's strongest sword that was charging at him with all its strength. It was like a collision of meteorites, and an amazing power burst out. Terrifying airwaves spread in all directions, as if they were going to break the sky. The Black Shadow's forward momentum was stopped. Then, from the black sword, it began to crack inch by inch and disappeared in front of Chen Zong's eyes. As for Chen Zong, he did not move at all. In the next moment, 2 black shadows condensed, one on the left and the other on the right. Their figures swayed, leaving countless residual shadows. Their long swords also swayed, leaving countless sword shadows. Their astonishing chi locked onto Chen Zong, bringing a terrible pressure, as if 2 huge meteorites were rotating and condensing in the sky, exuding a pressure as heavy as a mountain. Chen Zong was still standing where he was, allowing the terrifying aura to lock onto him. He did not move an inch. When the 2 figures were within 3 meters of each other, all of his power erupted in an instant and poured into the long sword. He charged towards Chen Zong with an indomitable will. It was incomparably tragic. Chen Zong struck out with both of his swords and collided with the 2 swords. The overbearing and sharp sword energy surged like a volcanic eruption. Just like before, the 2 figures began to disintegrate from the long sword and disappeared into the air. Then, there were 4 figures. They attacked in the same way, causing Chen Zong to face 4 terrifying attacks at the same time. He had no choice but to slash out 4 times to defeat them. Then, there were 8 figures. These 8 black shadows did not attack at the same time. Instead, they were the first to arrive. Before Chen Zong could defeat them, the second one arrived, followed by the third one. Chen Zong was enduring the attacks of 8 peak 5-star combatants continuously. If it were another peak 5-star combatant, he would have been blasted into pieces. However, Chen Zong still did not move an inch. Even his sword-wielding arms did not move an inch. The impact of each attack was very terrifying. There would be a small part of it remaining. The continuous attacks would stack up and wreak havoc in the body. If there was time, it could be expelled. However, if there were still external attacks, there was no way to expel it. Instead, the external attacks would intensify. 16 terrifying opponents attacked continuously, causing Chen Zong's hands to tremble. Indomitable will, however, Chen Zong did not seem to notice it. He was immersed in the mystery of the Black Shadow's swordsmanship. Under the continuous attacks, Chen Zong had a better grasp of the mystery of that sword. That sword was about gathering all the strength in one's body and increasing it as much as possible. Then, it would be condensed and unleashed in an instant. It was the most powerful attack. The sword codex of the unhindered sword, which runs through the heaven and earth, sweeps in all directions, and is invincible. It must be powerful enough. A strong feeling was about to burst out. 32 peak 5-star combatants exerted all their strength to launch the most powerful attack. They rushed toward Chen Zong with the determination to die together with him. Chen Zong's feet gradually stepped on the ground. He resisted the attacks of these black shadows and continued to comprehend. When he defeated 16 people, his arms trembled slightly. The 17th person's arms trembled more obviously. The 18th person's trembling became more obvious. When the 24th person arrived, Chen Zong could not help but lean back. When it came to the 28th person, Chen Zong could not help but take a step back. Chen Zong was forced to take 3 steps back when the last person arrived. Every step he took seemed to shatter the ground beneath his feet. However, the floor of the Heaven Ascension list was extremely hard. Even the attack of a transcendent realm master could not damage it. It was even more impossible for Chen Zong to destroy it. The force of the rebound made Chen Zong's feet ache. It was enough to show how powerful the trampling force was. However, in the end, he managed to hold on. However, 64 figures appeared. There was no room for retreat. They attacked Chen Zong again, one after another. Continuously resisting the previous strong enemies, Chen Zong not only sharpened his sword qi, but also consumed a lot of his strength. However, Chen Zong still had no intention of dodging. He was still resisting the attacks of his opponent. The cross-shaped sword light broke through the air and collided head-on with the opponent. A strong feeling was about to burst out. Fight, fight, fight. Slash, slash, slash. Traces of peerless sharpness gradually condensed on the two swords. The 30th strong enemy rushed forward. Under the combination of the terrible power and the residual power from before, Chen Zong was forced to take 3 steps back. However, just as he steadied himself, the 31st strong enemy also arrived. Chen Zong did not retreat. However, he had to retreat because the impact was too strong. For a moment, the great true qi in Chen Zong's body surged endlessly. His pure yang blood qi was agitated. The combined sword force of the two was like a surging tide. Although his strength was constantly being consumed and there was not much left, the remaining strength was constantly condensing and accumulating. It was like a torrent that was about to burst a dam. The 56th strong enemy, Chen Zong, was forced to take 10 steps back. The 2 swords in his hands almost flew out. His blood qi reversed and he almost vomited. His 5 viscera and 6 bowels felt like they were burning. He was injured. However, Chen Zong did not care at all. His eyes were full of fighting spirit, with an earth-shattering light. There was a trace of arrogance unparalleled in the world. Heaven and earth, vertical and horizontal, when the 4 words were spoken, their auras shook the heavens. The 2 swords emitted an incomparably resplendent light, bringing with them the last of Chen Zong's strength as they slashed out. The cross-shaped sword light illuminated the world, as if it was going to split the heavens and earth into 4. It brought with it an extreme power that could destroy everything. Words could not describe the tyrannical power of this attack. Wherever it passed, the 57th strong enemy was completely defeated before he could use his sword technique. It was irresistible. The 58th, the 59th, the 60th, the 61st, the 62nd, the 63rd. When the cross-shaped sword light dissipated, there was still one last strong enemy to be killed. However, Chen Zong had exhausted all his strength. Not only did he use the great true force, but he also used up all his physical strength. He was still standing only because of his amazing willpower. Chen Zong couldn't even move his fingers, yet he still managed to squeeze out a smile. After which, the black figure in front of him slashed out with his sword. A terrifying strike directly slammed into Chen Zong's body. In that instant, Chen Zong could clearly feel his body shattering inch by inch. Under the ravaging power of the attack, he was reduced to dust. The moment Chen Zong turned into powder, a ray of light appeared out of thin air and disappeared with Chen Zong. His consciousness sank into complete darkness. When Chen Zong felt something, he found that countless eyes were on him with horror, as if they were going to pierce through him. It's him! Impossible! How can it be him? Although after some analysis the 10th level of the Heaven Ascension Pagoda was not that insurmountable, and that someone could still reach it, no one expected it to be Chen Zong. In the battle with Xiaozhen on the life and death arena, everyone could tell that Chen Zong had used a secret technique and used all his strength to kill Xiaozhen. As for Xiaozhen reaching the 8th level, it was estimated that Chen Zong had a chance of reaching the 9th level. However, the 10th level was just too difficult. No one believed that he could reach it. How is this possible? Xiaoba muttered under his breath as he clenched his fists. An intense sense of danger filled his eyes with murderous intent. It was as if lightning was flashing in his eyes. Reaching the 10th level meant that Chen Zong's combat strength was extremely terrifying. His talent was also astonishing. He might not be Xiaoba's match now, but once he broke through to the pseudo-transcendent realm, he might have the strength to match Xiaoba. When that happened, it would be even more difficult to kill him. However, Ghost Sword Xin Wuxing smiled faintly. Even though it was a normal smile, it was enough to send chills down one's spine. His eyes turned even deeper. He unconsciously tightened his grip on his sword. It would be more interesting to kill such a genius. Xian Zai, who had failed the tower challenge, had an ugly expression. As for the yin-yang profound sword couple, they were shocked but also happy. Young friend, congratulations on breaking the record. Yang Profound Sword said with a smile. I was lucky. Chen Zong also said with a smile. At that moment, Mo Sin came out after failing the 9th level. Immediately following that, a wall on the 10th level lit up. Another person has reached the 10th level. Who is it? 2 people have broken the century-old record. Everyone exclaimed. Chen Zong was also rather surprised because he had reached the 10th level after clearing the 9th level. He knew very well how difficult it was. To be able to reach the 10th level, one had to be extremely powerful. Unknowingly, a word appeared in Chen Zong's mind. It was a name. As for whether it was true or not, he could not be sure. He would only know when the person left the Heaven Ascension Pagoda. Everyone's eyes were focused on the 10th level. Time passed. About 4 hours later, the wall of the 10th level flickered, and a figure was squeezed out of it. Who is he? I don't know him. It really is him. Chen Zong secretly smiled. A young man in a green robe with a flame-like pattern on his forehead was Qing Chen. Chapter 601. Brother Chen, which floor did you reach? Qing Chen walked over and asked with a smile on his face. 10th. Chen Zong smiled. As expected of Brother Chen. Qing Chen was slightly startled and immediately smiled. Chen Zong, give me your reward and I'll leave your corpse intact. An extremely cold voice sounded like an evil spirit from hell, making one's hair stand on end. This voice was not concealed at all, and immediately caused everyone around to be horrified. It was hard to imagine what the reward for reaching the 10th floor was, but it must be incomparably precious. Who below the transcendent realm would not want it? The one who spoke was the Xin family's ghost sword, Xin Wuxing. His pale face and deep eyes made Chen Zong feel like he was being stared at by an evil spirit. Give me your reward and I'll consider not killing you. Chernzong responded without fear. It was like a stone thrown into water, causing a huge splash. Arrogant! Who do you think you are? How dare you speak so arrogantly? You can't even compare to a toe of my brother Wuxing. Many people in the Xian family were shocked and began to criticize Chernzong. Many people also felt that Chernzong was too arrogant. Who was Xian Wuxing? He was the Ghost Sword, a master ranked 4th on the Heaven Ascension list, a top genius. Even a genius like Xiaoba was no match for him, let alone a true martial realm cultivator. Xian Wuxing, on the other hand, did not respond. He only smiled. It was a chilling sight. Qing Chen stood aside and did not interrupt. After that, Chernzong left and returned to Heaven Ascension City, accompanied by the yin-yang mysterious sword couple. They chatted while protecting Chernzong in case someone attacked him. Little friend, what reward did you get? Yang Xianjian finally could not help but ask curiously. Both husband and wife had never tried the Heaven Ascension Tower because they were too old. Simply put, the yin-yang mysterious sword couple's talent was not bad. They were geniuses, but they were not top geniuses. Their cultivation was slow in the early years, but they had some opportunities to grow. Now, they had reached the transcendent realm. Chernzong reached the 10th floor, which broke the century-old record. The reward must be extraordinary, so it was normal for the yin-yang mysterious sword to be curious. If it's inconvenient, don't say it. Yang Xianjian realized that he was being rude, so he added in a sincere tone. There's nothing inconvenient. Chernzong smiled. With a flip of his hand, a strange-looking black token appeared. The token was shaped like a pagoda, exactly the same as the Heaven Ascension Pagoda. Little friend, can I take a look? Yang Xianjian asked. Chernzong then handed the token to Yang Xianjian. After Yang Xianjian received it, he carefully studied it, but he still couldn't see through the profundity of the token. Yin Xianjian also studied it for a while, but he still couldn't find anything. The two of them were surprised. Any treasure must have something extraordinary, be it its aura or other aspects. The yin-yang mysterious sword was a late bloomer. He was very experienced and knowledgeable, but even so, he couldn't see any mysteries of this token, let alone Chernzong. Little friend, maybe you can drip a drop of blood on it. Yang Xianjian thought for a while, then returned the token to Chernzong and suggested, You reach the 10th floor, which is the highest record in 100 years. There's no reason for you to get something useless. Yes, maybe this treasure is too mysterious. We can't see through it. Yin Xianjian agreed. After thinking for a moment, Chernzong decided to give it a try. He cut his finger and squeezed out a drop of blood, dripping it onto the medallion. The three of them stared with wide eyes. That drop of blood didn't disperse, but instead quickly merged into the medallion. This scene caused the hearts of Chernzong and the others to tremble. There's hope. If it was an ordinary item, even if the drop of blood could merge into it, it wouldn't be so thorough. Shortly after, the token emitted a hazy black light that condensed into the faint image of a small pagoda. It was exactly the same as the Heaven Ascension Pagoda. Shortly after, the small pagoda image entered between Chernzong's eyebrows. It was as if Chernzong had been immobilized, unable to move. In less than 10 breaths, Chernzong recovered, but he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Little friend, do you know what this is? Yang Xianjian couldn't help but ask. Tower entry token. Chernzong didn't know how to describe his current mood, so his tone was a bit strange. Tower entry token? Yang Xianjian frowned, even more puzzled. What tower? Heaven Ascension Tower? If it's Heaven Ascension Tower, doesn't it only open once a year? There's no need for a tower entry token. Simply put, with this token, within the next 6 months, I can enter the Heaven Ascension Tower again. There's no need to wait until next year. Chernzong explained, then added, Only I can use it. Yang Xianjian suddenly understood, but immediately became very puzzled. There was no need to wait until next year to enter again. It didn't seem to be very useful. After all, the purpose of challenging the Heaven Ascension Tower, besides training, was to obtain rewards. However, if one was given a tower entry token after reaching the 10th floor, it meant that one could enter the tower again. What was the point of entering the tower again? Naturally, it was to continue challenging the tower. Could it be that, if one reached the 10th floor again, there would be other rewards? However, the reward for challenging the tower for the first time was often the best. After some analysis, they came to a conclusion. This tower entry token didn't have much value at all. After all, only Chen Zong could use this condition. If this condition didn't exist, perhaps it could be traded, and someone might be willing to buy it at a good price. I think the only value is that you can enter the tower at any time. Yang Xianjian suddenly thought of something, then frowned and analyzed. In half a year, perhaps your battle strength will improve greatly, and you will be able to pass the 10th floor, enter the unprecedented 11th floor, and obtain the inheritance of Emperor Li Tian. Yin Xianjian and Chen Zong were both startled. After thinking about it, this was indeed a possibility. However, was it possible to improve his battle strength so much that he could pass the 10th floor in half a year? It was hard to say. Anyway, since the Heaven Ascension Tower has rewarded you with a tower entry token, perhaps it really has some use. Yang Xianjian finally said, "Little friend, work hard and improve your battle strength as much as possible. Try to challenge the tower again in half a year. Perhaps you can really reach the 11th floor." Naturally, these words were more comforting. The limit of LV9 True Martial Realm was the end of the True Martial Realm. As for LV10 True Martial Realm, it was too illusory. In the Ascending Heaven region, no one had ever reached it. It was much more difficult than reaching the perfection of Qi Refining Realm. Even if there were some special methods to continue improving, it was not cultivation. The effect on battle strength was not particularly big, and it could not achieve the effect of rapid improvement. Grasping the minor true meaning could indeed increase one's battle strength. However, the activation of the minor true meaning required a lot of mental energy. The true martial realm was destined to be a trump card. After sending the Yin-Yang Xianjian couple off, Chen Zong sat down in the guest room and started to think carefully. The enemies on the 10th floor of the Heaven Ascension Tower are all at the peak of 5-star. Ordinary 6-star warriors would not be able to withstand them. The reason why I could last until the end was because of the fusion of 80% of my physique and 80% of my Zhonghu true force. Chen Zong thought to himself. When Chen Zong's physical strength and Zhonghuang true force had fused to 70%, his battle power had increased to the early stage of 6-star. Although he had not reached the middle stage of 6-star yet, he was still stronger than a normal early stage 6-star. Secondly, there was also Chen Zong's superb swordsmanship. He had reached the perfect realm of body and sword as one. This realm was something that many masters of swordsmanship could not achieve. The combination of all these factors allowed Chen Zong to reach the end of the 10th floor. It seemed that he could pass the 10th floor by just a little bit. However, just a little bit was like a natural chasm. Tower entry token, half a year. Chen Zong held the tower entry token in his hand. There was a bright light in his eyes. If I can completely master the second change of mind, my battle strength will be even stronger. Maybe I can reach the middle 6-star level. Chen Zong thought to himself. The higher the battle strength, the harder it was to improve. The difference between the early 6-star level and the middle 6-star level was very obvious. With the battle strength of the middle 6-star level, it was possible to pass the 10th floor and enter the 11th floor. As for whether it was true or not, Chen Zong could not be certain. Half a year. Then I will try my best to improve. Chen Zong thought to himself. He started to think about how to improve himself as much as possible in this half a year. He had no clue how to reach the 10th stage of the true martial realm. He could put it aside for now. The most important thing now was to cultivate the change of mind. He would first master the second change, then the third change. In addition, he would use the ultimate move of the Zhonghu Sword Codex. After reaching the 10th floor of the Sky Ascension Tower, he had comprehended it by chance and used it in one fell swoop. However, he still needed to perfect it. The people of the Nangong family, the Xian family, the Martial Saint Palace's Xiahou family. They all want to kill me. Now that I can't break through to the pseudo-transcendent realm, I will cut off my future. Chenzong thought again. His eyes were sharp. If I leave the city, I will definitely be attacked by them. It was not that Chenzong was looking down on himself. It was indeed very difficult for him to fight against these forces. Even if he had some trump cards in hand, he could kill one or two of them. How could he kill all of them? As for the protection of the yin-yang mysterious sword, Chenzong did not want to trouble the two of them. After all, he was a rogue cultivator. Although he was at the extreme mortal realm, he had just broken through and might provoke the transcendent realm masters of these three forces. If the transcendent realm masters attacked the two of them, it would be an extremely bad ending. In that case, I will stay in Sky Ascension City and try to improve my battle strength as much as possible. Chenzong thought to himself. His eyes were burning with anger and fighting spirit. If he could cultivate the second change of mind, his battle strength might reach the middle 6-star level. If he could cultivate the third change of mind, his battle strength might increase even more. At that time, he would be able to challenge the Sky Ascension Tower. Chapter 602. Please subscribe, please subscribe, please subscribe, please support. Standalone games are not fun, please support me. 6 Dao. Thanks everyone. Half a month after Heaven Tower opened was the busiest half a month in Heaven Ascending City. Little friend, did you know that someone reached the 10th floor yesterday? Yang Xianjian smiled. Chenzong was surprised. He had been training in the inn these days, and did not ask about the outside world. Chenzong was very clear about the difficulty of reaching the 10th floor. It required one's own combat strength to reach the early stage of 6-star. It was not relying on secret techniques to reach the 6-star level. It required one's true combat strength. After all, there were all kinds of limitations to increasing one's combat strength through secret techniques or secret technique. Who is it? Chenzong was curious. Other than Qing Chen and himself, who else reached the 10th floor? Battle of the Realm, Xiao Zhanchen. Yang Xuanjian's tone was serious. Xiao Zhanchen. Chenzong was slightly startled, and immediately remembered the other's identity. He was a core disciple of the Thousand Heaven sect, a peerless genius ranked second on the Minor Heaven Ascending list. His title was Battle of the Realm, and his fighting spirit was shocking. 2 years ago, after Xiao Zhanchen reached the 9th floor, he left the Ascending Heaven region to train in other regions. He has only just returned, and his fighting strength is even stronger. He reached the 10th floor in one go. Yang Xianjian explained, with Xiao Zhanchen's fighting strength, if the first-ranked person on the Minor Heaven Ascending list came, the 10th floor would be a cinch. Chenzong nodded. The overall fighting strength of the Ascending Heaven region was higher than that of the Longtu region. If it was in the Longtu region, perhaps only that disciple from the ancient mountain could reach the 10th floor. Do you know why Xiao Zhanchen is called Battle of the Realm? Yang Xianjian suddenly smiled and asked. Chenzong thought for a bit, and made a guess based on what Yang Xianjian said. Battle maniac? Yes. Yang Xianjian said with certainty. Xiao Zhanchen is a battle maniac, as if he was born to fight, and he likes to challenge those who are not weaker than him. Little friend, since you reach the 10th floor, I think that Xiao Zhanchen will come to challenge you soon. Let him come. Chenzong smiled. As expected, someone came to him the next day. His short hair stood erect, and his eyes were blazing like the sun. He was constantly emitting an oppressive fighting spirit. The short robe on his body seemed to be made of gold, but it wasn't gold. It made his figure seem even more vigorous. "Chernzong, come and fight with me," the newcomer said directly without any trace of politeness. "Where?" Chernzong replied as he stood up. In addition to the life and death ring, there were other battle rings in Ascending Heaven City. Some of these battle rings were open, while others were closed. They were specially used for people to fight and learn from each other. On the closed fighting ring, Chernzong and Xiao Zhanchen stood 100 meters apart. There was no one around. Since you can reach the 10th floor, it means that your fighting ability is at least at the beginning stage of the 6-star level. The fighting spirit in Xiao Zhanchen's eyes became more and more intense, like the rising sun. Invisible energy gathered in his body, then rushed out of his body and rushed up to the sky. Vaguely, there seemed to be thunder roaring in the sky. "Let's not use any secret technique. We will fight with our own strength." "Okay." Chernzong agreed right away. It took him half a month to regenerate the seal of wind and thunder. If he used it, he would have to wait another half a month. He would not use it if he could. "Take my punch first," Xiao Zhanchen said. His voice was not loud, but it was like rolling thunder. He raised his right arm, bent his elbow, and clenched his fist. Chernzong saw a red light condense on Xiao Zhanchen's fist. The red light was hard and heavy, like heavy iron. Xiao Zhanchen punched out, and the red fist energy shattered the sky. The wind and clouds surged, and the sharp sound seemed to come from the distant sky. It was magnificent and unstoppable. It was just a probing punch, but it showed amazing power. It was enough to defeat an ordinary 5-star warrior. The Sky Sun Sword was already in Xiao Zhanchen's hand. He slashed out. It was a simple slash, but it was powerful and unstoppable. The sword light shattered and the fist energy dissipated. "Great!" Xiao Zhanchen laughed. He raised his arms and clenched his fists. The red fist energy was like a burning flame, and the aura it emitted was even more shocking. Boom, 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 boom. It was like a red dragon was baring its fangs and brandishing its claws. Every attack was beyond the 5-star limit. The dragons attacked, and the terrifying aura made Chernzong's face turn serious. Xiao Zhanchen was indeed a genius who could reach the 10th level of the Sky Tower. This fist technique was indeed terrifying. However, Chernzong was not easy to deal with. With 2 swords in his hands, he unleashed his sword techniques, shattering the iron-red dragons one after another. His figure flashed, and he became one with his sword, instantly closing in on Xiao Zhanchen. Good. Xiao Zhanchen was not surprised. Close combat was also his forte. After the punch, his arm suddenly bent, and his elbow was like a hammer that could break the sky. Then, he blasted forward with his shoulder, as if he could knock down a mountain. Attack, attack, attack! Xiao Zhanchen's body was the best weapon. Every part of his body had been trained to an amazing level. It was the first time Chernzong met such an opponent. It seemed that no matter which part of his body, he could attack and release amazing attack power. Xiao Zhanchen was like a human-shaped weapon. Compared to Xiao Zhanchen, Chernzong mainly fought with 2 swords. In the process, Chernzong could clearly feel that some of the mysteries of Xiao Zhanchen's fighting technique were in the red qi. Any martial artist who used their body as a weapon would have an amazing physique. They must have practiced a superb body refining technique and had suitable tools to complement it. However, although Xiao Zhanchen's physique was not weak and was much stronger than ordinary martial artists, it could not be compared to Chernzong. The reason why he could withstand the attacks of the 2 swords was not only because of the short robe he was wearing, but also because of the red qi. It was a powerful technique. Chernzong's guess was right. Xiao Zhanchen was practicing a strange technique of the 10,000 Sky Sect. the art of blue iron blood. It was very difficult to practice the art of blue iron blood. It was almost masochistic. Therefore, very few people would choose this technique. Even if they chose it, they might not be able to practice it successfully. They might even cripple themselves. It was said that when Xiao Zhanchen was born, there was a red light that shot up to the sky and reached hundreds of feet. He was born extraordinary. After that, he showed a vision. Every time he was injured, he would heal himself in the shortest amount of time. After joining the 10,000 Heaven sect, he had chosen the Iron Blood Azure Billow art. Relying on his own uniqueness and extraordinary perseverance, he had bitterly trained for many years and finally reached the small success stage. With one stroke, he had astonishing battle prowess and stepped into the minor heaven ascension ranking. Moreover, he had advanced by leaps and bounds, reaching second place. Going out to other places to practice, he improved further. The art of blue iron blood also improved, and his combat power became stronger. This strange technique required continuous fighting with strong opponents to improve. This was also the reason why Xiao Zhanchen liked to fight. Of course, it was also related to his personality. Boom, boom, boom. Chen Zong's crisscrossing sword art was firm, overbearing, and sharp. Xiao Zhanchen's Iron Blood Azure Wave art was also firm and overbearing. It belonged to the category of skills that met force with force. The same went for its supporting martial arts. The two of them exchanged blows again and again on the fighting stage. Countless chi waves surged in all directions. Ha 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 ha, this is great! Xiao Zhanchen roared and laughed as he continued to attack. The red chi on his body was like a burning flame. It seemed to be getting hotter and hotter, burning everything around it. Resisting Chen Zong's two swords again and again, Xiao Zhanchen was very surprised by the power of the swords. Chen Zong was also surprised by Xiao Zhanchen's cultivation method. That kind of power was actually somewhat similar to the power cultivated by the second transformation of the mind. In other words, the cultivation method that Xiao Zhanchen cultivated had the profoundness of combining the power of blood and true power. It was just that true power should be the main force, and blood and true power should be supplementary. Chen Zong had now begun to integrate 90% of his physique and 90% of his great true force, but he had not fully mastered it. Therefore, his combat power was still at the early 6-star level. Even so, he was still unable to defeat Xiao Zhanchen and could only maintain a tie. Fight, fight, fight. Chen Zong also knew that if he relied on his superb swordsmanship, he could gradually suppress Xiao Zhanchen. However, the effect of tempering his own strength was not as good. Xiao Zhanchen was also very surprised. After tempering his combat power time and time again, it had surpassed the ordinary early 6-star level and was approaching the middle 6-star level. The purpose of his return this time was to find the first place of the minor heaven ascension list. After defeating him, he would use the momentum from reaching the top to break through to the pseudo-transcendent realm and then challenge the heaven ascension list. However, when he returned, he happened to see the opening of the heaven ascension tower, so he decided to give it a try. When he came out after reaching the 10th floor, he heard that 2 people had reached the 10th floor. One of them had already left and his whereabouts were unknown, but the other was still in Heaven Ascension City, and came to challenge him. Xiao Zhanchen thought that his opponent's combat power was only at the early 6-star level, and that he should be able to defeat him quickly. However, unexpectedly, as the battle continued, Xiao Zhanchen could feel that the power of his opponent's sword seemed to be gradually increasing, and the pressure it brought to him became more and more obvious. Unexpectedly, Xiao Zhanchen was even more excited and the red chi around his body became even more intense. Iron Blood Battle Law. Wild Dragon shocks the world. With a low roar, a red chi burst into the sky and covered half of the battle stage. As Xiao Zhanchen blasted out, the red chi condensed into a raging dragon that was as thick as a man's waist. The Iron Blood battle law was unparalleled, and its momentum shook the entire battle stage, as if it was about to shatter. So strong! Chen Zong secretly exclaimed. The power of this attack was infinitely close to the middle 6-star level. However, Chen Zong did not dodge and instead swung his two swords to meet the attack head-on, tempering his sword chi. The Wild Dragon's Iron Blood battle law shook the world. In the blink of an eye, the air around it fluctuated and formed a terrifying vacuum with countless vortexes. Chapter 603. The battle stage was reinforced by the power of a transcendent, making it extremely hard. Even a pseudo-transcendent would have a hard time destroying it. With the destruction of the dragons, Chen Zong retreated to the edge of the battle stage. Good, let's go again. Xiao Zhanqen's eyes lit up. His iron-red qi rose up like a raging flame, erupting like a volcano. Iron Blood battle law. Wild Dragon double symphony. The iron-red light covered the entire battle stage, covering the sky and the earth. The astonishing momentum pressed down on Chen Zong, making him feel as if he was being crushed by an iron mountain. Roar. Two iron-red dragons, each as thick as a person's waist, broke through the air and shot out. Iron Blood battle law. Wild Dragon chaos. After the two dragons, Xiao Zhanchen pounced forward, his body transforming into a wild dragon as he punched out with both arms. The two dragons shattered one after another, but Xiao Zhanchen's arms seemed to have transformed into a group of dancing dragons, roaring and attacking continuously. The two swords met each other head-on, the sword chi was continuous, shattering one dragon shadow after another, but more dragon shadows arrived. Xiao Zhanchen continuously punched out 180 times, each with the power of a mid-6-star. The power of this combination was terrifying. Even if Xiao Zhanchen was a mid-6-star, he was confident that he could defeat him with this move. However, Chen Zong stood in place, resisting the 180 punches and only retreating 9 steps. Compared to the previous wild dragon shocking the world, this move was obviously stronger. Take one of my swords. As soon as Chen Zong's voice fell, his two swords flew across the sky. A dazzling cross-shaped sword light suddenly lit up, tearing apart the iron-red qi. It was like a cross-shaped sun above the battle stage, brilliant and unparalleled. Heaven and earth. Heaven and earth, only I can move freely in all directions, in all directions, in all directions. Xiao Zhanchen's face was dignified, but his eyes were filled with ecstasy and excitement. He clenched his fists and raised his arms. Countless iron-red qi poured into his body, causing the void to tremble. As soon as they came into contact, Xiao Zhanchen could feel an extremely strong, domineering, and sharp power slashing towards him, as if it wanted to cut off his arms. Moreover, that kind of power was endless, as if there was an invisible arm constantly pushing towards him. Retreat, retreat, retreat. Xiao Zhanchen could only keep retreating. The iron-red qi on his arms flickered wildly, like a candle in the wind. Xiao Zhanchen retreated all the way to the edge of the platform before the cross-shaped sword light was completely neutralized. Xiao Zhanchen used the last of his strength and shook his arms, shattering the cross-shaped sword light. The iron-red qi on his body also dissipated. Ha 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 ha, awesome, awesome. Xiao Zhanchen laughed heartily. He had used up almost all of his energy in this battle. He was extremely carefree. What's the name of your sword? Heaven and earth, Chen Zong answered with a smile. He also felt very carefree. What a good move. Xiao Zhanchen was still laughing. Today's battle can be considered my loss. We'll fight another day. Vaguely, Chen Zong felt that Xiao Zhanchen's momentum seemed to have become stronger. Xiao Zhanchen had gained something from this battle, and so had Chen Zong. 90% of his physique's power and 90% of his Zongjing true power were now completely under his control. Only 10% of the second transformation of the transformations of will was left. If I want to cultivate the remaining 10% in a short time, I must find a strong enough opponent to fight. Chen Zong thought to himself. However, even Xiao Zhanchen would not be able to give him enough pressure. What about a 6-star warrior who was stronger than Xiao Zhanchen? At least a 6-star warrior. Where could he find one? After thinking about it for a while, Chen Zong decided to focus on a transcendent realm master. You want to fight with me? Yang Xianjian's face was full of surprise, and so was Yin Xianjian. Naturally, it's not a true battle with Senior. Chen Zong hurriedly explained, I need enough pressure in order to further improve my combat strength. However, it is difficult to find a suitable opponent. Therefore, I would like to ask Senior to give me enough pressure so that I can further improve my combat strength. Yin Xianjian suddenly understood. Little friend, even though I've just broken through to the transcendent realm and am only at the first layer of the mortal realm is still the transcendent realm. The gap between me and those below the transcendent realm is immeasurable. If I'm not careful, it's likely that there will be repercussions and damage my foundation. Yang Xianjian said seriously. I know. Chen Zong's face was firm. I want to challenge the Heaven Ascension Tower again within half a year. I must have enough strength to pass the 10th floor and enter the 11th floor. No matter what, I have to try my best. He really couldn't find anyone else. Okay. Yang Xianjian thought for a moment and nodded in agreement. Chen Zong directly rented a sealed battle stage and the two stood on it. Yang Xianjian's aura, as vast and mighty as the sun, spread out from his body and raged throughout the sealed battle stage, causing Chen Zong to feel suffocated. It was as if his body was being pressed down by an iron mountain, or as if a mighty sun had locked onto him, causing him to feel like he was about to collapse. In Chen Zong's eyes, Yang Xuanjian's figure disappeared and was replaced by a vast and mighty scorching sun. And within that scorching sun, there seemed to be a sword shadow that emitted a shocking sharpness. Each of the sharpness was able to split the earth and tear the sky apart. The heat was able to burn mountains and boil seas. Yin Xianjian stood to the side, carefully observing Chen Zong's state. If there were any signs of him not being able to endure, she would take action to counteract Yang Xianjian's powerful aura and save Chen Zong. Pressure, an unprecedented pressure. It seemed to have directly pressed down from the sky, but it also seemed to be pressing down from all directions, constantly attacking. That kind of pressure was not only tyrannical and peerlessly violent, but it was also like layers upon layers of torrential waves, continuous and unending, as if it was endless. In an instant, Chen Zong felt like he was in the middle of a raging heavenly sun sea, as if he had turned into a reef or an ore thrown into an oven, being burned by the terrifying flames from all directions. His consciousness became blurred and he couldn't remember anything. In a daze, Chen Zong maintained a trace of consciousness and controlled his strength. Under such terrifying pressure, the power of the physique and the power of the unhindered true power started to merge bit by bit. A strange state, Yin Xianjian secretly said, but felt somewhat relieved. The difference between the transcendent realm and the transcendent realm was like the difference between heaven and earth. Even if Yang Xianjian didn't erupt with her full aura, it was still difficult for her to resist. Under this terrifying pressure, Chen Zong felt like his body was being crushed and burned to ashes. The strength in his body seemed to be crushed again and then reformed again and again, until the last 10% of his strength was constantly fusing together. When the last 10% of his strength was completely fused, a tyrannical force instantly penetrated Chen Zong's body. His bones, muscles, blood, internal organs, and 9 true meridians were all penetrated in an instant. The tyrannical and violent power was like a pure yang, containing the sharpness of a sword. Penetrating every part of his body, Chen Zong couldn't help but tremble. Yin Xianjian saw this and quickly released her aura. Her aura was different from Yang Xianjian's. It was soft like water, like a bright moon rising in the sky. It wasn't as violent as the sun, but it unknowingly offset Yang Xianjian's aura, so Chernzong was no longer affected. Yang Xianjian also withdrew her aura and her gaze fell on Chernzong, frowning slightly. At this time, Chernzong's state was quite strange. Even with their rich experience, the couple couldn't see it, but they didn't think it was bad. After a while, Chernzong opened his eyes, and there seemed to be a ray of divine light blooming, causing the Yin-Yang Xianjian couple's eyelids to twitch unconsciously. Many thanks, Senior. Chernzong quickly sensed his body and couldn't help but show a touch of joy. 100%. He had finally mastered the second transformation of the mind transformation. Now, in terms of strength, it was twice as strong as before, and the power of the sword art driven by this sword intent was not as simple as doubling, but more. Profound sword arts could often allow one to exert strength more thoroughly, even surpassing the limit, doubling, or even more. My battle strength should be able to reach the mid-6-star level. Chernzong thought to himself, then immediately stood up and saluted Yang Xianjian and Yin Xianjian. Little friend seems to have changed, but how much has your battle strength increased? Yang Xianjian asked curiously, why don't you try using your full strength? Okay. Chernzong immediately agreed. With a flash of sword light, the two swords were unsheathed and sword chi was awe-inspiring. Heaven and Earth Rampage. Without any hesitation, Chernzong directly used 100% of his sword chi to perform his ultimate move. The dazzling cross-shaped sword light dazzled the world, like the sun and moon compressed into a cross, enveloping the sky above the battle stage and seemingly dividing it into four. Yin-Yang Xianjian was slightly surprised. In their opinion, this power was indeed not strong enough to threaten a transcendent, but compared to a true martial realm cultivator, it was undoubtedly very strong, and had a unique mystery. Unhindered in all directions, looking down on the world with disdain, this kind of will was unparalleled. The cross-shaped sword light shot down from the sky, as if it wanted to split the earth into four pieces, directly slashing at Yang Xianjian's protective spirit flame, as if it was going to break it. Yang Xianjian maintained his protective spirit flame, and deliberately strengthened it, but did not deliberately weaken it. He carefully felt the impact of the cross-shaped sword light. The power at the beginning is amazing, reaching the mid-6-star level, and the subsequent impact is continuous, not inferior to the initial impact at all. What kind of power is this? Yang Xianjian was shocked. He was shocked, not because of the power of this sword, which posed no threat to him at all, but because of the power and profoundness of this sword. One had to know that Chernzong's level was infinitely far below his own. Yang Xianjian was 100% sure that if he was at the same level as Chernzong, he would be directly killed by this sword. There was no chance of survival. Little friend, your battle strength should be at the mid-6-star level. Yang Xianjian sighed. At the true martial realm, his battle strength had reached the mid-6-star level. This kind of talent was peerless. Little friend, if you open your acupoints and transform your true force into pseudo-spirit force, your battle strength will greatly increase, and you can directly step into the 8-star level. Yin Xianjian smiled. Now you can try the Sky Ascension Tower again. Maybe you can pass the 10th floor in one go and enter the unprecedented 11th floor. At that time, you can obtain the inheritance of Li Tian Emperor. Yang Xianjian smiled, his eyes blazing. Chapter 604. As the night fell, the city was brightly lit. From a distance, it looked like a group of shining stars. This was Ascending Heaven City in the middle of the night. The inn Chernzong stayed in was the largest in Ascending Heaven City. It had quite a big background and there were many masters guarding it. Firstly, it was to prevent people from causing trouble, and secondly, It was to prevent people from secretly attacking the guests. Naturally, the price of the rooms was also high, but it was nothing to Chunzong. Inside the room, the light was as bright as day. It was constantly shining from a fist-sized ball, bright but not dazzling. The eyelids of Chunzong, who was sitting cross-legged on the bed, trembled slightly as he opened his eyes. His eyes instantly emitted a strand of bright light. It was like an invisible sword chi that tore through the air and pierced through the light that was as bright as day, leaving behind 2 dim marks that vanished in an instant. The third change of mind is too difficult to cultivate. Chunzong frowned slightly. With the help of the pressure from the Yang Profound Sword Transcendent Realm Master, Chunzong successfully cultivated the second change of mind. He had been cultivating the third change of mind for several days now, but he still couldn't get started. The third change of mind was indeed difficult to cultivate, but even for the second change of mind, Chunzong could get started within a day. Now, 3 or 4 days had passed, but there was no sign of him getting started on the third change. Chunzong didn't know what to say. After analyzing, Chunzong also understood why it was so difficult to get started. Spiritual power. The cultivation of the second transformation of the mind was to fuse the power of the physique and the true power into one. The cultivation of the third transformation was to fuse the mental power into the power cultivated by the second transformation. However, spiritual power was more illusory compared to physique and true chi. Not only did it lack a cultivation method, but it also lacked a method to apply it. At least, Chunzong hadn't mastered it yet. In that case, the application of mental power would be very shallow and crude. On the other hand, there was a prerequisite for the cultivation of the third transformation of mental power, which was to have a precise grasp of mental power. Coincidentally, this was Chunzong's weakness. A cultivation method for spiritual power is too difficult to obtain. Chunzong thought to himself. Since his cultivation was fruitless, Chunzong got up and walked out of the guest room and the inn. He planned to take a walk on the street to relieve his boredom. After all, he had been cultivating for several days. The street was long, the lights were bright, and the shadows of people were swaying. Beautiful women sang and a fragrant breeze wafted through the air. Chunzong walked to the side of a lake. There was a gold-threaded ship floating slowly in the middle of the lake, creating layers of ripples. The shadows of the weeping willows on the shore swayed gently in the night wind. Standing by the lake, Chunzong emptied his mind. Suddenly, he felt many sharp and malicious gazes landing on him from all directions. Chunzong ignored them. These gazes came from none other than the Nangong family, the Xian family, and the Martial Saint Palace. They were all spying on him. As long as he showed any signs of leaving Ascending Sky City, they would immediately take action and kill him outside the city. 100 consecutive victories in the 100 Battles arena of the 100 Battles City, and now he has reached the 10th floor of the Ascending Sky Tower in Ascending Sky City. This kid's potential is too terrifying. If we don't get rid of him as soon as possible, he will become a big threat. On the long street of Ascending Sky City, Long Tai's voice was cold and full of killing intent. The 4 of them had chased after Chunzong from the Longtu region and entered the Dengtian region. At the same time, they inquired about Chunzong. They thought that it would be very difficult. After all, a mere true martial realm martial artist entering a large region was like a stone thrown into the sea. At most, it would cause a little splash, and then disappear without a trace. They had even prepared to spend a long time and a lot of money. Unexpectedly, it didn't take long for them to hear news about Chunzong. 100 consecutive victories in the 100 Battles City. After some understanding, they were shocked. It was extremely difficult to achieve 100 consecutive victories. When they were rushing to the 100 Battles City, they heard another piece of news. Chunzong had reached the 10th floor of the Ascending Sky Tower. This news was many times more shocking than 100 consecutive victories. This was because the 100-year battlefield and the Heaven Ascension Tower were two different levels of existence. The Heaven Ascension Tower was famous in the Heaven Ascension region. It was a treasure left behind by that expert when he left. No one knew what level the treasure was. It might have surpassed the level of a spiritual weapon. The Ascending Sky Tower opened once a year. Challenging the Ascending Sky Tower was a grand event. As members of the Dragonteeth Guard, they had entered the Ascending Sky region many times because they were often on the lookout for criminals. Those who could reach the 9th floor of the Ascending Sky Tower were already top geniuses. In the Longtu region, they were at the top level. It was hard to imagine that they could reach the 10th floor. Because of this, the four people's faces were so ugly. The more outstanding Chen Zong's performance was, the more pressure they felt. If they couldn't kill Chen Zong, it would be a big disaster in the future. It might be more troublesome than they had imagined. Chen Zong should still be in Ascending Sky City. A captain said. Ascending Sky City has strict rules. Even if we see Chen Zong, we won't have a chance to kill him. Wait for an opportunity. The vice commander said. Of course, if they were willing, they might be able to find an opportunity to attack Chen Zong like a death warrior. They might even be able to kill Chen Zong, but the consequence was that they would also die here, and no one would stand up for them. No one was willing to sacrifice their lives to kill Chen Zong. Although they were loyal to the third prince to a certain extent, they were not his men of sacrifice. Each of them had their own selfish motives. First, find out where Chen Zong is and keep an eye on him. As soon as he leaves Ascending Sky City, immediately intercept him outside the city. Kill him with all your might. The vice commander said again. The other three captains had no objection to the decision. Chen Zong. A familiar calm voice sounded. Chen Zong was stunned. He turned around and was even more shocked. Senior Yu. Chen Zong couldn't help but call out. Not far away, a man was walking towards them. He was calm and composed. There seemed to be a mysterious aura surrounding him. It was Yu Wuya from the Black Sword sect. This was Ascending Sky City, the center of the Ascending Sky region. Why was Yu Wuya here? The thought flashed through Chen Zong's mind, but he didn't find the 9th prince. As the 9th prince's personal guard, Yu Wuya usually wouldn't leave the 9th prince's side. The 3rd prince said that you colluded with criminals and killed the Dragonteeth Guard. He has now sent the vice commander of the Dragonteeth Guard and 2 captains to pursue you. The 9th prince is worried about you, so he asked me to go. The Black Sword sect said concisely. For a moment, Chen Zong was silent. The 3rd prince's actions were within his expectations, but the 9th prince's actions were unexpected. Although the 9th prince treated him very well in the Dragon Diagram Imperial City, he was now a criminal. To a certain extent, he had betrayed the Dragon Diagram Imperial family. The 9th prince had sent his personal guard, the Black Sword sect, to protect him. This favor was as heavy as a mountain. Senior Yu, please thank the 9th prince for me. Chen Zong said sternly. However, I've caused quite a bit of trouble since I came here. These troubles are beyond the scope of what you can handle. Moreover, the 9th prince also needs you, so please leave first. If an ordinary person heard the first half of Chen Zong's words, they would probably feel unhappy, but the Black Sword sect wouldn't. In the end, he was just a pseudo-transcendent. Since Chen Zong said that the trouble he caused was beyond his scope of handling, he wouldn't say it casually. Let's hear it. The Black Sword sect's Yu Wuya was still a little curious. He wanted to know what kind of trouble this young man, who was more talented than him in the Tao of the Sword, had caused. Chen Zong couldn't help but smile. He then told him about the forces he had provoked. Following Chen Zong's explanation, Yu Wuya's jaw dropped. If it was just an unranked Nangong family, it wouldn't be a big deal. It wasn't like the Black Sword sect hadn't done this before. But the Xian family, a mid-ranked Tao of the Sword sect, surprised him. Then there was the martial Saint Palace, a high-ranked Tao of the Sword sect, which shocked Yu Wuya. Thinking back, there was also the third prince. Wherever he went, he would cause trouble. The Black Sword sect understood that he didn't have the ability to protect Chen Zong. His main responsibility was to protect the ninth prince. Therefore, the Black Sword sect left Ascending Heaven City and quickly returned to Longtu Domain. Chen Zong wasn't unhappy. The ninth prince asked the Black Sword sect to come, and the Black Sword sect really did come. This was a kindness. The Nangong family, the Xian family, the Xiahou family of the Martial Saint Palace, and the Dragon Teeth Guard should have also come to Ascending Heaven City. Chen Zong looked at the surface of the lake that reflected the lights like stars and said to himself, "It can be said that strong enemies are lying in wait." There was no moon or stars in the dark night sky. It was as if there was an enormous pressure descending from the sky and attacking from all directions, wanting to suppress Chen Zong. It was also as if an invisible net was covering Chen Zong, wanting to bind him. This kind of invisible pressure made it hard for Chen Zong to breathe and almost suffocate him. However, Chen Zong wasn't afraid because of this. Instead, he revealed a trace of a smile, his eyes as sharp as swords. "So what if there are strong enemies? I have 2 swords to break them." In that instant, Chen Zong felt as if his mental strength had transformed into a sharp sword, wanting to break through the clouds. Chen Zong retracted his gaze after glancing at the surface of the lake and turned to leave with large strides. There was another inn diagonally opposite the one Chen Zong was staying at. It was a bit smaller, and the vice-commander of the Dragon Teeth Guard and the 3 captains were all inside. All of them had grave expressions on their faces. As soon as they inquired about the news, they found that things were getting more and more troublesome. Not only did Chen Zong reach the 10th floor of the Sky Ascending Tower, but he also defeated Xiao Zhanchen, who was ranked 2nd on the Minor Sky Ascension ranking and the number 1 true Martial Realm core disciple of the Myriad Sky sect. It doesn't matter. Chen Zong is talented and has potential, but he is also a troublemaker. Even if we don't do anything, the Nangong, Xian, and Martial Saint Palace won't let him go," a captain of the Dragon Teeth Guard said. When they found out that Chen Zong had provoked these 3 forces, their eyelids twitched. Especially the Xian and Martial Saint Palace, they were even more shocked. One had to know that the Ascending Heaven region was different from the Longtu region. It lacked the supervision of the Longtu royal family's laws. Even though Transcendence usually wouldn't act against cultivators below the Transcendence realm, there were still a few cases. Therefore, from this point of view, Chen Zong was still in Ascending Heaven City and was safe for now. However, as soon as he left Ascending Heaven City, what awaited him would be death. Could Chen Zong stay in Ascending Heaven City for the rest of his life? Impossible. Chapter 605. Within a radius of 1,000 meters, there were shining 4-edged sword pillars that were as thick as thighs, pointing straight to the sky. Every sword pillar was 2 meters tall, and there was no hilt, only a 4-edged sword body standing upright on the ground. The edges were sharpened, emitting a faint cyan light, looking extremely sharp. At a glance, there were hundreds of such terrifying sword pillars. They were densely distributed, and the distance between each sword pillar was less than half a meter. Chen Zong stood at the entrance. Seeing this scene, he was very surprised, and then his eyes shone brightly. "I hope this place can help me master this body movement in a short period of time," Chen Zong said to himself. A few days ago, Chen Zong bought a body movement technique in a treasure house in Ascending Sky City. It was a heaven-level body movement technique that lacked the last level. 9 phantom light steps. This was a combat footwork, unlike the sweeping 8 directions technique that was used for long-distance running. Chen Zong stepped into the range of the sword pillars. With a buzzing sound, the sword pillars seemed to come alive, and started to rotate slowly. The terrifying sharpness became even more threatening, like sword chi soaring into the sky, which made people's hearts palpitate. Taking a step forward, Chen Zong crossed the first sword pillar and entered it. Immediately, the rotating sword pillars began to move. They moved back and forth, left and right. Their speed was not fast, but when they intersected, they sealed off all possibilities of dodging. Chen Zong's figure flashed, and his feet seemed to be wrapped up in a ray of light. His figure then followed with astonishing agility, dodging the attack of a sword pillar. However, at the same time, a few more sword pillars attacked. The terrifying rotating sharpness seemed to want to tear Chen Zong apart, and nothing could stop it. At this critical moment, Chen Zong did not use his sword to block. Instead, he took another step forward, and with light under his feet, he dodged again. It was a close call. It was as if he was walking on a tightrope, and below him was a bottomless abyss. The cultivation of these sword pillars brought Chen Zong enough pressure, which made him more focused and easier to cultivate. For example, cultivating this sword pillar required 10 substandard spiritual sources a day, which was quite expensive. The complete Phantom 9 Steps technique was divided into 3 stages, but Chen Zong had only bought the first 2 stages. If it was the complete Phantom 9 Steps technique, it would be a heaven-grade peerless art. Usually, it would be taken by the big sect and would not be circulated outside. The first level was called Shadowless Illusory Light. As the name implied, once one reached the pinnacle of this technique, one would be unable to see one's figure, only a ball of illusory light. It would cause one to be dazzled, difficult to capture, and difficult to attack. The second stage was called 9 Revolutions, 1000 Revolutions. It was based on the first stage and was even more profound. Now, Chen Zong was practicing the first level of the shadowless phantom light. Light shone under his feet. Time flew. For a few days, Chen Zong had been practicing the Phantom 9 Steps technique in this sword pillar. His comprehension was amazing, and under the hard work, he made rapid progress. When he took a step forward, the illusory light suddenly rose from his feet, as if it had swallowed his legs and reached his waist. The lower half of Chen Zong's body turned into an illusory light. His feet could not be seen, and his body seemed to be several times lighter. He was incomparably agile, and he calmly avoided the attacks of the sword pillars. Cultivate, cultivate, cultivate. Every time he performed the Phantom 9 Steps technique, the illusory light would spread further on his body, to his chest, and then to his neck. When the illusory light covered his whole body and became one, it meant that the first level of the shadowless phantom light had been cultivated to the pinnacle. Today I'll cultivate it to the pinnacle, Chen Zong thought to himself. With a bit of obsession and amazing talent, the first level of the shadowless phantom light continued to move forward. Between the hundreds of sword pillars, a ball of illusory light moved quickly. It was as light as the wind, and as nimble as the floating clouds. With a swoosh, the ball of light became one, and it shuttled through several extremely dangerous sword pillars without touching them. Immediately, the illusory light rushed out of the sword pillars' range, and appeared outside of them. When the light disappeared, Chen Zong's figure also appeared. I've finally cultivated the first level. Although my combat strength did not directly increase, it has become more flexible. Chen Zong thought to himself, and a sharp light flashed in his eyes. After I've cultivated the second level, I'll go challenge the Sky Tower. Chen Zong had not made any progress in the cultivation of the third level of the change of will. He knew very well how to cultivate the third level, and he also knew the reason why it was so difficult for him to cultivate it. However, there was no way to solve it now. He had searched in many treasure pavilions, but there was no suitable way to cultivate spiritual power. This kind of cultivation method was even more precious than a peerless heaven-grade secret art or martial art. Only a small number of powerful forces possessed such a method. Since this was the case, if he wanted to become stronger, he would have to break through to the peak of the true martial realm. Currently, he had no clue how to do so, and with half a year's time, Chen Zong had no confidence he would succeed. The other option was to break through to the pseudo-transcendent realm. However, after breaking through to the pseudo-transcendent realm, his combat strength would greatly increase, but if he went to challenge the Sky Tower, the difficulty would become as high as a pseudo-transcendent. At that time, whether or not he could reach the 9th floor was still unknown, let alone the 10th or 11th floor. After thinking about it for a while, Chen Zong really could not find a way to continue improving his combat strength in a short time, so he chose this incomplete peerless heaven-grade movement technique. After cultivating it, his combat strength would not directly increase, but it would significantly increase. At that time, it would be time for him to challenge the Sky Tower. Striking while the iron was hot, Chen Zong continued to cultivate inside the sword pillars the next day. This time, Chen Zong wanted to cultivate the second stage of the 9 revolutions Phantom Light 9 steps, 9 revolutions, 1000 revolutions. The mysteries of this stage were at least several times more profound than the first, so naturally, it was more difficult to cultivate, but Chen Zong had already comprehended it, so all that was left was to cultivate and master it. Taking one step after another, the light under Chen Zong's feet surged upwards, engulfing his entire body, transforming him into a mass of illusory light, as light and agile as the wind. Amidst the intense buzzing, the rotation and movement speed of the sword pillar more than doubled, becoming even more terrifying. As it rotated, it even emitted waves of astonishing suction force. The crazy suction force seemed to mince everything in the surroundings into powder. Its rotation speed was extremely fast, and as it moved, it rubbed against the air and emitted an astonishing high temperature, turning into strands of flames that burned fiercely. In an instant, the entire sword pillar field seemed to be engulfed in a raging inferno, becoming even more terrifying. Compared to before, this kind of power had increased by at least 10 times. Chen Zong's expression changed. He never imagined that the sword pillar's difficulty would be so terrifying when raised to the highest level. At this time, some people walked into the sword pillar field, preparing to cultivate with the help of the sword pillar. There were a total of 3 people, and as soon as they stepped in, they were greeted by a sea of fiery red, as if they had walked to the edge of a sea of fire. The blazing heat made their mouths dry and their bodies hot. What's going on? Who activated the sword pillar's highest difficulty? The 3 people were all horrified, their eyes widening as they stared at the blazing inferno in front of them, their ears echoing with a terrifying momentum, making them feel very small. It was too terrifying. I can only see a mass of light, I can't see who it is. The person who can cultivate at this highest difficulty should be a pseudo-transcendence. The 3 of them directly defined Chen Zong as a pseudo-transcendence master. In fact, in terms of speed and agility, Chen Zong was indeed not inferior to an early 7-star pseudo-transcendence, and even faster than those who were not proficient in speed. Now that he had cultivated the more advanced Phantom Light 9 steps, his speed had been further enhanced, so it was not surprising that he was regarded as a pseudo-transcendence master in this aspect. Chen Zong did not know what the others were thinking. The pressure he was under right now was too great. He felt that the terrifying sword pillar was strangling him, as if it would grind him to dust at any time, and the terrifying heat was constantly rising, as if it would burn him to a crisp. The light around his body flickered, becoming thinner and thinner. Chen Zong's footsteps seemed to gradually slow down, and his figure seemed to become more hazy. The 4 sword pillars madly strangled him, and the terrifying flames surrounded Chen Zong from all directions, leaving him with nowhere to run. Even if he had reached the consummate first layer of the Phantom Light 9 steps, he could not escape. Just as Chen Zong was about to be strangled and burned to ashes by the 4 sword pillars, Chen Zong took a step forward. This step seemed to be accompanied by endless smoke, as if he had crossed over from another world. The moment his foot landed, Chen Zong's figure was astonishingly distorted, as if he had been torn apart by an unknown power. It was as if ripples of light were surging in his body. At the same time, four terrifying sword pillars with blazing flames shot out and struck the shattered light figure, causing it to disappear completely. However, Chen Zong's figure appeared outside the four sword pillars, safe and sound. That's the feeling, Chen Zong thought. The feeling just now was very mysterious and difficult to describe in words, but it was the mystery of the 9 steps, 1,000 revolutions. Of course, it was just the first layer of the 9 steps, 1,000 revolutions. Chen Zong continued to cultivate, but the consumption of the second layer was many times more than that of the first layer. Even with Chen Zong's terrifyingly pure true force, he could not support it more than a few times. When the energy was almost exhausted, Chen Zong left the sword pillar formation, and the sword pillar formation gradually quieted down. It's him. Who? Chen Zong, the first person to reach the 10th floor of the Sky Tower in 100 years. Isn't he in the real martial arts realm? Yes, he is in the real martial arts realm. He can cultivate at the highest level of the sword pillar and still be intact. How terrifying! The 3 people looked at Chen Zong's back as he left, and their eyes widened in horror. After that, Chen Zong came to the sword pillar formation every day to cultivate the 9 steps, 1,000 revolutions. Every day, he made progress and gradually improved. First layer. Second layer. Third layer. Fourth layer. Improvement, improvement, and improvement. In the blink of an eye, 1 month had passed, and Chen Zong had cultivated the 9 steps, 1,000 revolutions, to the last layer. But this was not the end, but a new beginning. Because the Phantom 9 steps was a footwork that was driven by true force, Chen Zong's strongest strength was the strength of his body and the sword energy formed by the true force, so he had to try to use the sword energy to perform this footwork. Using the sword energy to perform the Phantom 9 steps was more difficult than Chen Zong had imagined. The first layer was okay, and it took Chen Zong 10 days. The second layer was really difficult. 1 month had passed, and there was only progress, but it was not complete. Chapter 606. Thank you for your support, but I can't stop subscribing. The night was quiet, and the stars were shining brightly. The Black Tower of Ascension was like a black giant, standing above the earth and under the sky, sleeping. Suddenly, a wall on the 10th floor of the Tower of Ascension flickered with light. The light was more obvious in the dark night, but it was not strong, so no one noticed it. After all, the annual opening of the Tower of Ascension was over, and the people who came for the Tower of Ascension had already left. The remaining people would not pay much attention to the Tower of Ascension, so they had to wait until the opening of the Tower of Ascension next year. Therefore, the light on the wall on the 10th floor of the Tower of Ascension did not attract anyone's attention. This is... Chen Zong was a little stunned. He looked at the figure in front of him and felt the powerful aura that the figure emitted. This did not seem to be the first floor. Following that, the figure rushed over like a bolt of lightning. As the figure swayed, there seemed to be countless afterimages circling around him. The black longsword was pointed straight at Chen Zong. An astonishing aura locked onto Chen Zong from afar. The body of the sword trembled slightly, and countless afterimages followed the figure. Stepping within 3 meters, all the afterimages gathered, and the wind and thunder surged. It was like a falling meteor, releasing the most powerful attack that could destroy mountains. Chen Zong swung his sword, and there was no sound of collision. He easily defeated the opponent's sword, and then the figure was defeated. I can't believe I went straight to the 10th floor, Chen Zong muttered to himself. Well, I can save the time of going through the tower. This time, Chen Zong did not need to refine his body, and his combat power had increased greatly. He swung his sword and defeated 2 figures directly. Then, he defeated 4 figures with 1 sword. Almost as soon as the figure appeared, Chen Zong slashed out with his sword. He used the least amount of strength to launch his strongest sword attack. He did not give his opponent the slightest chance to retaliate. Otherwise, if he waited until his opponent had used his strongest sword attack, he would use up even more energy. His figure did not move, and he tried his best to preserve his strength. Chen Zong had a feeling that the 10th floor was not as simple as the previous 9 floors. Slash. Slash. This was the absolute difference in combat power. 32 figures were also slashed by Chen Zong's dual swords, and then there were 64 figures. Chen Zong struck out with both swords, slashing out a sword light that was like a full moon. In an instant it swept out in all directions, and the 64 figures were all defeated. Compared to before, he was calm. After mastering the second transformation of the mind. It was a huge leap for an early-stage 6-star warrior to reach mid-stage 6-star warrior. Chen Zong watched as the 64 figures were defeated and disappeared. However, he did not use up too much of his strength. He had only used up about 30% of his strength. He still had 70% left. The light voice sounded ethereal and lively, as if it was echoing in the boundless wilderness under the azure sky. At first, it was like a gentle breeze, then it became like a howling gale. Chen Zong was shocked. He had no idea where the sound came from. He quickly looked around, but there was nothing. "I'm here." When the voice sounded again, Chen Zong felt as if it was right beside his ear. He saw a figure appear out of thin air in front of him. He was dressed in a purple robe, and his hands were clasped behind his back, facing Chen Zong. His feet stepped lightly on the floor of the 10th floor of the Sky Ascension Pagoda. His body was light, as if he was about to fly with the wind. The figure was right in front of him, but it gave Chen Zong a feeling that it was infinitely far away, as if it was separated by layers of time and space. Like a flower in the mirror or the moon in the water. "May I know who you are?" Chen Zong asked. "I am who I am." That purple-robed figure laughed softly. He then turned around. It felt as if time had passed since ancient times, but also as if it had only been an instant. When he turned around to face Chen Zong, it was as if he had traveled through thousands of time and space to arrive here. This person looked like he was in his 30s. He was gentle and elegant like a great scholar. His eyes were very deep as the void of the universe, as if thousands of stars were being nurtured in them. He was like a god. "Defeat me." The middle-aged man put down his hands behind his back. Light flickered and transformed into a long sword. Chen Zong was stunned. Although he didn't know who this person was or how strong he was it possible to defeat him? Chen Zong had no confidence at all. The aura of the other party was like the void of the universe, and he couldn't resist it at all. "Don't worry." The purple-robed man smiled. He quickly withdrew his aura, and then slashed out with his sword. The purple light of the sword pierced through the air as fast as the wind. Chen Zong quickly pulled out his sword and slashed out. In the collision, Chen Zong felt that the other party's strength was about the same as his. They were at the same level. In this way, Chen Zong made up his mind. The other party meant to fight with him at the same level of strength. He took a step forward, and light appeared under his feet. His whole body was suddenly swallowed by the illusory light. In the blink of an eye, he strangely appeared beside the purple-robed man. His 2 swords pierced through the air continuously. Countless sword lights bombarded like a meteor shower. Each sword was domineering and incomparably powerful. The purple-robed man's eyes lit up slightly. He saw through all the mysteries of Chen Zong. Then he slashed out with his sword. It was an ordinary slash. It was only the sweeping sword of the basic swordsmanship, but it blocked all of Chen Zong's hundreds of sword lights as if it could sweep away thousands of soldiers and horses. Then he stabbed out again. It was the piercing sword of the basic swordsmanship. The sword pierced straight toward Chen Zong. Countless auras surrounded Chen Zong, which frightened him. It was only the piercing sword of the basic swordsmanship, but it carried a terrifying aura that could scare away ghosts and gods. It was unstoppable. Chen Zong quickly raised his sword to block the attack. The extremely powerful force burst out. Chen Zong's arms trembled. He flew backward as if he was constantly pushed by an incomparably powerful force. The purple-robed man slashed out again. It was still the sword of the basic swordsmanship. The sword slashed down. It seemed to be a simple slash, but it carried a terrifying aura that could cut through everything. Chen Zong's face suddenly changed. He found that he could not dodge it no matter how hard he tried. The sword slashed down, as if the whole sky was crushing down. What kind of power was this? Since he could not dodge, he could only take it head-on. Chen Zong not only had to take it head-on, but also break it. Heaven and earth. The two swords pierced through the air. The cross-shaped sword light of different colors was like the compression of the sun and the moon. It gathered amazing power and reflected on the 10th floor of the sky-reaching tower, as if the sky-reaching tower was divided into 4 parts. The cross-shaped sword light pierced through the air and met the purple-robed man's sword. Chen Zong was not sure if this move could withstand the opponent's sword slash. Although the purple-robed man had suppressed his combat strength to the same level as Chen Zong's, the realm of his swordsmanship was higher than Chen Zong's. Under the support of that terrifying aura, the basic swordsmanship became very amazing. Perhaps it could not be called a basic swordsmanship anymore. It was a more advanced power, a power that was beyond Chen Zong's current realm. The purple-robed man's face was calm. He slashed down with his sword and directly shattered the cross-shaped sword light. The sword momentum did not disappear. Chen Zong felt like he was being cut into pieces. He slashed out again. Heaven and earth. He activated the sword's strength and made 3 consecutive moves to defeat the opponent's sword. Not bad, the purple-robed man said softly, but this is still not enough. As he spoke, the purple-robed man slashed out again. It was still a very simple slash, but it contained an unparalleled aura. It was extremely sharp and seemed to follow some kind of principle of the world. It seemed to be a simple path, but it was extremely profound. Chen Zong used Zhonghuang's sword skill to the extreme. Combined with Zhonghuang's sword skill, he could not do anything to the purple-robed man. Instead, the purple-robed man's sword made Chen Zong tired. He had to use 9 turns, 1,000 turns to dodge. The purple-robed man slashed out again. The blade of the sword was steady and straight, as if it was carrying an invisible mountain. Even if it was hit by a hurricane, it would not sway at all. It was a very simple move. The blade of the sword could be seen clearly, and the trajectory of the sword seemed to be clearly captured. However, Chen Zong's pupils dilated and his hair stood on end. This move was more terrifying than any of the previous ones. Not only did it make it difficult for him to move, but it also suppressed his thoughts as if they were frozen. Chen Zong wanted to perform 9 twists and turns to dodge, but he found that he was really imprisoned under this move. He could not dodge or resist. He could only watch the sword coming for him. The terrifying momentum contained in it seemed to be about to crush him. Even if the opponent was not as strong as him, it would be difficult for him to resist. Defeat? What was there to talk about? In this case, he should be desperate. However, Chen Zong did not despair. Instead, he opened his eyes as wide as possible and stared at the incoming sword. The sword was very slow, like a crawling snail. Chen Zong could see it clearly, but there was nothing he could do. Chen Zong could feel that if he could not get rid of it or resist it, his soul and body would be annihilated by this sword and completely disappear between heaven and earth. However, how could he resist or get rid of it? Could he do it with his current strength? Even if he had mastered the 3rd transformation of his mind, he would not be able to resist this sword. So, how could he break out of this situation? Where was the key to breaking out of this situation? Momentum. Yes, it was that momentum, that amazing and indescribable momentum, that made each of the purple-robed man's sword extremely terrifying. That momentum was closely related to the sword. It was related to the sword. Could it be the realm of the sword? His swordsmanship realm had already reached the perfection of man and sword as one, but he could not break through to the next realm. It was too difficult. Under normal circumstances, only transcendence could reach this step. Even Master Blacksword had only reached the perfection of man and sword as one earlier than him and was only half a step into the next realm. The mystery of the realm was indescribable. Suddenly, as if something had broken, the mysterious sword tip in the depths of his mind trembled slightly and released a silver divine light that filled his entire knowledge sea. There is momentum in heaven and earth. The rising of the sun and the setting of the moon are momentum, and the blooming and wilting of the flowers are also momentum. Therefore, momentum always exists between heaven and earth, and ordinary people cannot find it. Suddenly, a vigorous voice sounded, as if it was ringing in his ears, but also as if it came from a distant world. It was mighty and ethereal, containing an ancient charm. Old friends seek martial arts and enlightenment. Chapter 607. The Momentum of the Sword. When these 4 words rang out, it was as if 10,000 thunderbolts had exploded in his ears, deafening even the apathetic. It was as if the heavens and earth had been created at the beginning of the world, or as if a sword light had split open the chaos, peerless and unparalleled. Chen Zong vaguely saw a supreme sword light descend from the sky. It was majestic, ancient, and profound. Nothing could stop the slash of this sword light. Everything would be pulverized by this sword light and turned to dust. Chen Zong stared with his eyes wide open. His expression was calm and his eyes were deep. They flickered with infinite light, like stars flickering in and out of existence, as if infinite mysteries were being revealed. From this sword light, Chen Zong saw a kind of momentum, a momentum driven by the sword light. It was a momentum that belonged to the heavens and earth. When combined with the sword light, it made the sword light invincible. The momentum of the heavens and earth was the momentum of the sword. In the way of the sword, the first stage was the unity of body and sword. It was a kind of power that belonged to the body. The momentum left the body and extended outside of the body, touching the heavens and earth. This was a power that could not be seen or touched, but it existed in every part of the world. Using the momentum of the heavens and earth for one's own use. Those who practiced the sword called it the momentum of the sword, or sword momentum for short. Suddenly, all the mysteries emerged. The light in Chen Zong's eyes changed more and more. There were countless people who practiced the sword in ancient times, but there were many who could achieve the unity of body and sword, and even fewer who could comprehend the momentum of the sword. Even most people at the extreme mortal stage couldn't do it. It was even more impossible for people below the transcendent stage. Simply put, only sword cultivators at the earth spirit stage had 100% chance of comprehending the momentum of the sword. In an instant, Chen Zong felt that everything around him was different. It was as if everything between the heavens and earth had become more vivid and lively. He could even see faint traces of energy swimming around, like fish swimming in the sea. A feeling told Chen Zong that if he followed these trajectories, his sword would become stronger. Chen Zong stabbed out, following one of the trajectories as if it was endless. But for some reason, Chen Zong had a strange feeling after the sword pierced out. It was as if nothing could stop the penetration of the sword. In the next moment, Chen Zong's sword attack was defeated. The irresistible force came crashing down, making Chen Zong feel like his whole body was collapsing. His bones and muscles seemed to be torn apart, and his internal organs seemed to be destroyed. He was in great pain. Not bad. You were able to comprehend sword force. You are indeed very talented in the way of the sword. The purple-robed man smiled and nodded, giving Chen Zong some affirmation. However, it's still not enough to defeat me with this half-step sword force. Half-step sword force. Chen Zong muttered to himself, but the injuries in his body quickly healed, and then he smiled. Even if I can't defeat you, I'll be satisfied if I can master half-step sword force and touch the second level of sword principle. Chen Zong's words were sincere and there was no falsehood in them. The more one cultivated, the more one felt insignificant. Insignificant in front of heaven and earth, insignificant in front of the Tao. This kind of insignificance made people unconsciously feel a trace of awe. Chen Zong had reached the perfection stage of man and sword principle for quite a long time, but he was still unable to break through to the next level. He couldn't even find the slightest clue. He even wondered if he would be able to reach it after breaking through to the transcendent realm. Even faster, he would be like Black Sword Sex Yu Wuya, who mastered half-step sword force at the Grandmaster realm. He didn't expect that in the Heaven Ascension Tower, he would be able to comprehend the mysteries of the second level of sword principle and master half-step sword force. Half-step sword force was a starting point. It was the starting point to break through to the second level of sword principle and master true sword force. Taking a deep breath, Chen Zong calmed down and focused his mind. Everything in front of him became clear again. Traces of light flashed in the air. Although they weren't clear, he could still see them. Following the traces, Chen Zong attacked again. The two swords pierced through the air one after another towards the purple-robed man. However, the piercing sword in the basic sword technique was completely different from before. Under the extreme sharpness, there seemed to be an unexpected power added to the sword, causing the two swords to become even more tyrannical. They could pierce through everything, and there was nothing they could not overcome. The purple-robed man secretly nodded. With Chen Zong's age and cultivation, it was indeed extraordinary for him to be able to master half-step sword force. If it was him at the beginning, he wouldn't have been able to do it. Now, it was time to see to what extent his opponent could display half-step sword force. After all, he had just mastered it. The purple-robed man didn't attack with his sword. Instead, he casually moved his feet and calmly avoided Chen Zong's two-sword attack. Attacking again and again, Chen Zong didn't have any other thoughts. He just followed the vague traces in front of him and constantly waved his two swords. In the beginning, it was just a stab. Sword after sword stabbed out continuously, following the blurry trajectory. Sometimes there would be deviations, resulting in not only not being able to unleash his power, but also a feeling of being blocked. Soon, Chen Zong found out the reason. Different trajectories had different uses. Among all the traces, only one was suitable for the stabbing sword. Following this trace, Chen Zong kept stabbing the long sword in his hand. Gradually, he got familiar with it and became more accurate. His power seemed to be increasing. The speed of the sword became faster and more tyrannical. However, the purple-robed man still calmly dodged. Occasionally, he waved his sword casually, which brought great pressure to Chen Zong and directly defeated all of Chen Zong's attacks. However, Chen Zong immediately reorganized and attacked with his sword again. At first, he stabbed the sword. Then, he caught the trace of the slashing sword and alternated between the stabbing sword and the slashing sword. The stabbing sword seemed to be able to pierce through everything. The slashing sword seemed to be able to cut through everything. After that, Chen Zong caught the trace of the slashing sword again. The 18 moves of the basic swordsmanship, each of which had its own application and mystery. Chen Zong had practiced it before. In the beginning, it was taught by his elder sister, Chen Chuyun. Every time he practiced, Chen Zong would at least practice the 18 moves of the basic swordsmanship. By now, it had become a habit and an instinct in his bones. As a result, Chen Zong was very familiar with the 18 basic sword technique. He was able to use each of them to the extreme, which was something that many sword practitioners could not compare to. However, at this moment, when he attacked according to the blurry trajectory between heaven and earth, he was able to increase his power by more than 10 times. The more he caught the trace of the sword, the more Chen Zong understood. He was completely immersed in it, as if he was about to merge with heaven and earth. However, the purple-robed man was not affected at all. He calmly dodged Chen Zong's attacks and made Chen Zong's strokes miss. Occasionally, he counterattacked with his sword and repelled Chen Zong. Every stroke of the purple-robed man contained real sword momentum, not half-step sword momentum. The difference between complete and incomplete was huge. Chen Zong knew that the purple-robed man was holding back. Otherwise, he would have been defeated and killed in one stroke. Since he wasn't going to kill Chen Zong, and was instead holding back, it was more like he was giving him pointers. Chen Zong had to make good use of this opportunity. Even if he failed to pass the 10th floor, he would be satisfied. Slashing, slashing, slashing. With 2 swords in hand, the traces in his eyes became clearer. However, there was always a feeling that there was something between them. It was still a little vague, like the mist on a crystal mirror. Slashing the sword was like wiping the mist on a mirror, making it clear. Without knowing the passage of time, he forgot everything and only had the sword in his heart. The 18 moves of the basic swordsmanship were performed by Chen Zong with 2 swords. The power of each stroke carried a trace of the power of heaven and earth. Its power was increased by more than 10 times, surpassing some powerful sword technique. Moreover, this kind of sword technique was simpler and faster. Every stroke was accompanied by a layer of flowing light, which was dazzling. "You have reached the peak of half-step sword momentum," the purple-robed man said softly, but only he could hear his voice. "Let's stop here." As soon as he finished speaking, he swung his sword. Unparalleled sword momentum descended and directly defeated Chen Zong's sword momentum. Once again, Chen Zong felt that he could not move. This stroke seemed to want to kill him. However, at the instant it was about to strike him, the peerlessly terrifying might of the sword that seemed as if the entire world was pressing down on him brushed past like a cool breeze. It no longer brought Chen Zong terrifying killing intent, but a refreshing feeling instead. "Thank you, Senior." No matter what, the purple-robed man had helped him comprehend the half-step sword momentum, and he did not kill him. "You are very good." The purple-robed man smiled slightly. His eyes became deeper and deeper, like a group of rotating stars, containing countless Taoist rhymes. "You have 9 lives, and each life you have mastered one path." The purple-robed man spoke again. His gentle voice contained endless charm. Even if Chen Zong did not deliberately listen, he would still be deeply imprinted. What he said surprised Chen Zong even more. 9 lives. This was beyond Chen Zong's imagination. 9 lives, what kind of concept was that? Chen Zong did not feel much about this because his realm was not high enough. He only felt that it seemed to be very powerful. That was all. "Senior, are you Li Tiandi?" Chen Zong asked. "Li Tiandi, that is also me." The purple-robed man smiled slightly. Chen Zong immediately understood what he meant. 9 lives. In this life, he was called Li Tiandi. As for the previous 8 lives, he was not. Although he had guessed it, Chen Zong could not help but feel shocked after the purple-robed man admitted it. It turned out that the last test of the 10th level was Li Tiandi. However, didn't Li Tiandi already tear the void and leave? Didn't he leave? "I'm just an incarnation." The purple-robed man seemed to have seen through Chen Zong's doubts, and said with a smile. "An incarnation." Chen Zong was shocked when he heard that. An incarnation gave him a feeling of looking up at a tall mountain and boundless sky. He did not know how big the gap between him and the purple-robed man was. It was just an incarnation. If it was Li Tiandi himself, how powerful would he be? What kind of cultivation would be needed to tear the void with his bare hands? Chen Zong did not know, but he knew that the gap between him and the purple-robed man was too big. The most important thing now was to complete his goal step by step and become more powerful. Now, follow me to the next level. The incarnation of Li Tiandi said. Chen Zong was suddenly stunned. They were now on the 10th level. The next level would be the 11th level. Senior, I didn't defeat you, did I? Chen Zong could not help but ask. Chapter 608. The 11th level of the tower was different from the previous 10 levels. Although it still looked empty, the feeling was different. Moreover, the top of the 11th level was like a void. There were countless lights shining on it. Some of the lights were strong and some were weak. They seemed to be of different distances. It was as if he was under a boundless starry sky. Vast and deep, Chen Zong felt as if his soul had been cleansed and became clearer. I have 9 lives. In each life, I have mastered a Tao. That Tao is the Great Tao. Under the Great Tao there are countless smaller Taos. Li Tiandi's avatar looked up at the starry sky and said calmly, "Those who pass the 10th level of the tower and enter the 11th level will receive my inheritance. Yes and no." Chen Zong listened quietly. When you tried the tower for the first time, you made it to the end of the 10th level. I saw that you had great potential, so I gave you a tower entry token as a reward. I hope that you can try the tower again within half a year. In other words, the other people who made it to the 10th level did not receive a tower entry token. Chen Zong was the only one who got it. You did not disappoint me. Even though I am only an avatar and not even 1/10,000th of my original self, you can't defeat me with your current strength. However, you must gain my approval. Only by gaining my approval can you pass the 10th level and enter the 11th level. Then, Li Tiandi's avatar waved his hand. The shining starry sky seemed to fall from the sky and appeared around Chen Zong. These are the insights of my 9 lives, Li Tiandi's avatar said solemnly. Chen Zong swept his gaze across the surroundings. Looking at the countless starlight, he was extremely shocked. The insights of his 9 lives were as vast as the sea. How small was he in front of it? Then, Li Tiandi's avatar pointed his finger 9 times in a row. Then, 9 rays of starry sky became brighter. They shone like 9 suns and surrounded Chen Zong. These 9 Taos are the great Tao that I have mastered in my 9 lives, Li Tiandi's avatar said seriously. Chen Zong carefully sensed the aura emitted by the 9 balls of light. It was as vast as the universe. In front of it, Chen Zong felt even more insignificant. With my inheritance, you can choose one of the 9 great Taos, Li Tiandi's clone said. Chen Zong was shocked when he heard this, but he did not make a hasty decision because he had too many questions in his mind. Senior, may I ask what is the great Tao? What is a minor path? Chen Zong couldn't help but ask. There is Tao in heaven and earth. Tao exists in all things. The void of the universe, all living creatures, everything is made up of Tao. Everything is Tao. The incarnation of Emperor departing heaven said. A mysterious feeling arose spontaneously. Chen Zong thought he had understood. But when he thought about it carefully, he didn't understand anything. The height of the Tao far exceeded the current level. It was still unreachable. The height of the Tao is heaven. It was called the Heavenly Way in ancient times. Below the Heavenly Way is the Great Tao. Below the Great Tao are the minor Taos. The incarnation of Emperor departing heaven said. But when he saw the confusion in Chen Zong's eyes, he stopped. The Tao could not be passed down easily. It was not only precious but also profound. Without a matching realm, it was impossible to understand it. Chen Zong was indeed outstanding. He was much better than the incarnation of Emperor departing heaven in his first life. But after all, he was still young and lacked in all aspects. He had not even touched the minor Daos. Each of my 9 great Daos is different. That one is the great Tao of Sword. It may be the most suitable one for you. The incarnation of Emperor departing heaven pointed to one of the 9 balls of light that shone the brightest. The aura that the ball of light gave off was sharp and domineering. When Chen Zong focused on the ball of light that symbolized the great Tao of Sword, he seemed to see a giant sword that pierced through the sky. When the sword fell, heaven and earth would crack and everything would turn into nothingness. Perhaps, as the incarnation of Emperor departing heaven had said, the great Tao of Sword was the most suitable inheritance for him. If you receive the inheritance of the great Tao of Sword, you can cultivate according to it until you master it. The incarnation of Emperor departing heaven said, but I am just giving you a suggestion. The choice is still up to you. When Chen Zong heard this, he did not choose the inheritance of the great Tao of Sword immediately. It was a good thing to receive the inheritance of the great Tao of Sword from Emperor departing heaven. It meant that from now on, he would not have to take the wrong path. He would cultivate according to the great Tao of Sword until he mastered it completely and became an expert of the generation. But Chen Zong resisted it from the bottom of his heart. If other warriors knew about it, they would probably beat him to death. However, all real geniuses had their own pride. If he inherited the great Tao of Sword, he would be able to embark on a grand path and become an expert of the generation. But that was the path that Emperor departing heaven had walked. The more he followed Emperor departing heaven's comprehension, the deeper he would be shackled. Chen Zong did not want to. He was himself, not others. Maybe it was just a ridiculous stubbornness. Follow your heart. The incarnation of Emperor departing heaven smiled and said. Chen Zong closed his eyes and did not look. He did not want to be disturbed. He calmed himself down, like the surface of a lake without any ripples. Time passed slowly. Chen Zong calmed down completely. He forgot about the Sky Tower, the incarnation of Emperor departing heaven, and the great Tao and small Tao around him. It was as if Chen Zong had blended into this place and could not be distinguished. The incarnation of Emperor departing heaven stood quietly on the side and did not disturb Chen Zong. Chen Zong's choice was all up to him. The incarnation of Emperor departing heaven was just giving him some suggestions. The choice of the path was up to him. Once he made a choice, he would walk it without any regret. He listened to the voice of his heart. A circle of ripples slowly spread out in the calm lake of his heart. One circle after another, it spread out continuously. An invisible power swept over Chen Zong. The incarnation of Emperor departing heaven was slightly surprised. The invisible power spread out and swept over everything. Suddenly, spots of starlight appeared in the lake of his heart. The most dazzling ones were 9 of them. They represented the 9 great Tao that Emperor departing heaven had mastered. In the lake of his heart, Chen Zong could feel it even more clearly. Some were fierce, some were violent, and some were changeable, countless spots of starlight and endless aura. Every spot of starlight represented a kind of inheritance. Great Tao. Small Tao. Great Tao. How should he choose? What did he need the most? What was the most suitable for him? Chen Zong was not sure. After all, people were growing and their needs were different at every stage. So, what was the most suitable for him now? When this thought came to his mind, the spots of starlight in the lake of his heart gradually dimmed. In the end, only one spot of starlight was still shining. That might be the inheritance that was most suitable for him now. Chen Zong didn't know what kind of inheritance it was, but it was the choice of following his heart. The illusory heart lake disappeared, and his eyes opened. A trace of light shot out. Chen Zong's body moved, and he rapidly flew forward. His right hand was like a heavenly dragon's claw. The incarnation of Emperor departing heaven stared at Chen Zong to see what kind of inheritance he would choose. Then, Chunzong's right hand caught a spot of light. It's not a great Tao nor a small Tao, as the incarnation of Emperor departing heaven. He knew all the inheritances here very well, even though he did not even have 1/10,000th of his original strength. The great Tao inheritance was naturally the best, followed by the small Tao inheritance, and then the great Tao inheritance. The great Tao inheritance referred to all kinds of martial arts technique. After cultivating those techniques to the extreme, one would have the opportunity to touch the small Tao. But now, Chunzong did not choose a great Tao or a small Tao. He chose one of the great Tao inheritance, which was the lowest level. This was completely out of the incarnation of Emperor departing heaven's expectation. But there was no other way. This was Chunzong's choice, and it was a choice that followed his heart. It's that inheritance. The incarnation of Emperor departing heaven was shocked again because he sensed the inheritance Chunzong had chosen. Although it was not a great Tao or a small Tao and was only one of the great Tao inheritance, its value was the highest among the great Tao inheritance. It was not inferior to a small Tao at all. The light merged into Chunzong's palm and quickly spread through his arm, entering his mind. Chunzong stood still quietly as countless information flowed into his mind. That was an inheritance. After a while, Chunzong accepted the inheritance and was delighted. Indeed, this was the most suitable inheritance for him at this stage. Spiritual cultivation. This was the name of this inheritance. To put it simply, this was a technique to cultivate spiritual energy. The initial stage of cultivating spiritual energy was to cultivate one's spiritual cultivation. This was a very, very pure cultivation method for cultivating one's spirit and soul. It was extremely rare. It's your opportunity to obtain this spiritual cultivation method. The incarnation of Emperor departing heaven smiled. Thank you, Senior. Chunzong bowed to express his gratitude. Without Emperor departing heaven, he would not have been able to obtain such an inheritance. Chunzong felt that this spiritual cultivation method was extremely brilliant. Perhaps the spiritual cultivation methods owned by the major forces could not be compared to it. You obtained all of this with your own ability. The incarnation of Emperor departing heaven smiled. Then, the incarnation of Emperor departing heaven stretched out his hand and grabbed something in the void. Chunzong vaguely saw a shadow. It was the shadow of the Tower of Ascension. Then, the incarnation of Emperor departing heaven pushed his hand and the shadow of the Tower of Ascension shrank rapidly. It flew to Chunzong and entered Chunzong's body. Chunzong sensed it carefully and found nothing. However, the incarnation of Emperor departing heaven did not intend to explain. You have obtained the inheritance. Now leave this place. Come back when you become a transcendent. The incarnation of Emperor departing heaven waved his hand. Before Chunzong could say anything, he felt that he was wrapped up by an irresistible force. His surroundings became grotesque, as if he had passed through a colorful tunnel. In the next moment, Chunzong was back in the guest room of the inn. It was hard to imagine what kind of power it was. With a wave of his hand, he was sent back to the inn from the Tower of Ascension. Only after a long time did Chunzong calm down. The current him was still far too far away from the realm of Heavenly Emperor. Spiritual cultivation method. Chunzong muttered to himself. Then, he thought of the Tower of Ascension. He did not know what the purpose of merging it into his body was. Chapter 609. Other than Chunzong, no one else knew what happened in the Tower of Ascension that night. After calming himself down, Chunzong began to comprehend the art of spiritual enhancement. The art of spiritual enhancement was rather peculiar. When he first received the inheritance, Chunzong seemed to be able to see everything, but he did not remember it. He only had a general understanding of it. Now that he had calmed down to comprehend it, he realized that he only knew the first level. The art of 5 senses. The five senses were the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and body. They represented vision, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. Everyone had the five senses as long as they were complete. After obtaining the mysterious sword tip, Chen Zong's meridians had been cleansed and his bones had been reborn. His five senses were different from ordinary people. The strength of his five senses was closely related to his spiritual power. If his spiritual power was strong, his five senses would be strong. On the other hand, if his five senses were strong, his spiritual power would also be strengthened. The first level of the art of spiritual enhancement was to cultivate the five senses to a certain limit and strengthen his spiritual power. Only then would he enter the second level. The first level of the art of spiritual enhancement was the art of five senses. It was not difficult. After about 2 hours, Chen Zong had finished comprehending it and began cultivating. Now that he had reached a bottleneck in cultivating the third change of mind, he put it aside for the time being. He would cultivate the art of spiritual enhancement first to strengthen his spiritual power and further master his spiritual power. Perhaps he would be able to cultivate the change of mind better in the future. They complemented each other. The five senses were the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and body. Chen Zong began cultivating with his eyes. Yangming raised his hands and pointed his index fingers at the sides of his eyes. He pressed hard, causing his eyes to feel like they were being squeezed. At the same time, he channeled the five senses eye recognition technique. His mental power slowly moved and gathered in his eyes. A sour feeling arose spontaneously. Waves of burning heat slowly rose in his eyes. Chen Zong only felt that his eyes were about to be squeezed and burned. It was a very uncomfortable feeling. However, this was a necessary process in cultivating the art of five senses. As time passed, the pain in his eyes became more and more intense. It was so intense that Chen Zong almost gave up, but he persevered with his strong will. 2 hours later, Chen Zong stopped because he felt that his eyes had reached their limit. If he continued, it would only damage them. When the mental power dissipated, the sourness, swelling, and scorching heat also faded away. Instead, he felt relaxed and cool. It was so comfortable that Chen Zong could not help but moan. After a while, the comfortable feeling disappeared and his eyes recovered. When Chen Zong opened his eyes, there seemed to be a clear stream flowing through his eyes, pure and flawless. Looking ahead, he suddenly had a clearer feeling, as if the dust had been wiped away. He slowly shifted his line of sight and then opened the window to look outside. He could clearly see the veins on the leaves of a large tree thousands of meters away, as if they were right in front of him. Although he could do it in the past, it wasn't as clear as it was now. It's at least 30% better, Chen Zong said to himself. This kind of improvement was an overall improvement. It allowed his vision to become clearer, and he could capture even more minute details. Supervision was very important to a martial artist. It allowed him to see the minute details that others could not see. In a battle, he could seize the initiative and detect his opponent's movements earlier, so he could react better. Retracting his gaze, Chen Zong continued to cultivate. This time, he was cultivating his sense of hearing, which was his sense of hearing. He gathered his mental power from both his index fingers to his ears. His ears felt like they were being stretched open, and there was an invisible force constantly squeezing in. It felt like his ears were about to explode, and his eardrums were about to collapse. It was terrifying. Chen Zong forced himself to endure the uncomfortable feeling and kept using his mental power to refine his ears. Gradually, there seemed to be a buzzing sound in his ears. It was like a demon's voice was pouring into his brain, making Chen Zong feel even more uncomfortable and painful. The feeling grew stronger, and Chen Zong had the urge to break his head. After 2 hours, Chen Zong stopped. His mental power spread out, and the uncomfortable feeling faded away. Then, countless sounds came from all directions and kept entering his ears. Vaguely, Zong seemed to hear conversations and various other sounds coming from the room next door. It was blurry and noisy. In the past, it was impossible to achieve this without deliberate effort. Now, he was able to do it unintentionally. After this round of cultivation, his sense of hearing had improved significantly. After that, it was time to cultivate his sense of smell, which was his sense of smell. Similarly, he cultivated for 2 hours and had to endure extreme pain, but Zong persevered. After that, his sense of smell improved significantly, and he could smell the scents in the air more clearly. Everything in the world had its own smell. Only some of them were quite rich, while others were very, very faint, almost undetectable. However, when one's sense of smell reached a certain level, one could smell everything. The smell of wood, the smell of potted plants in the corner, and various smells drifted in from outside the window. After that, it was time to cultivate his sense of smell, which was his sense of taste. When people ate other than to fill their stomachs and survive, it was also a kind of enjoyment. To enjoy the taste of different foods, one needed to distinguish them with their sense of taste. After 2 hours of cultivation, Zong felt that his tongue was numb and swollen. It was also burning hot, as if it had been thrown into an oven. After cultivating his sense of smell, Zong did not feel anything for the time being because he had not eaten anything yet. Finally, it was time to cultivate his sense of smell, which was the sense of touch of the whole body. Among the 5 senses, cultivating one's sense of smell was the most difficult because it covered the largest area. Zong's mental power spread out, starting from his head and covering his whole body inch by inch. This was difficult in itself. If one's mental power was not enough, it would be impossible to complete this step. Fortunately, Zong's mental power was very strong, far surpassing that of cultivators of the same level. Even when compared to many pseudo-transcendents, it was not weak at all. Under his control, the invisible mental power covered every part of his body, as if he was wearing invisible clothes. Soon after, according to the body consciousness cultivation method of the 5 senses, the mental power that covered his entire body rippled like water waves and slowly flowed through his body. As it flowed, every inch of his mental power spun like a vortex, causing Zong to feel as if his skin was being torn apart and penetrating deep into his bones. Resisting this feeling, Zong constantly drove his mental power to temper his body. This was different from body tempering. After 2 hours, the cultivation of his sense of smell had reached its limit. Withdrawing his mental power, Zong could feel the fluctuations around him. He did not sense it with his eyes or ears, nor did he sense it with his superb swordsmanship. Instead, he sensed it with his body. He felt as if all the pores on his body had opened up, and every soft hair on his skin gently swayed. When he came into contact with the air, he could feel the fluctuations in the air. The effect was so obvious on his first cultivation, which made Zong more and more satisfied with this mind-tempering method. However, the cultivation time did not stop. In total, it was 10 hours, which was half a day. Walking out of the inn, Zong walked into a nearby restaurant, ordered a few dishes and a pot of wine, and tasted them leisurely. When the food entered his mouth, his taste buds seemed to explode, and the unique taste spread in his mouth, penetrating his entire tongue. The improvement of his taste buds indeed made Zong feel more subtle when he ate. No matter whether it was sour, sweet, bitter, or spicy, he experienced it more deeply. While Zong was enjoying himself leisurely, those who were monitoring him were secretly hating him. For the time being, Zong did not plan to leave Ascending Heaven City. He would first cultivate the mind-tempering method and improve himself as much as possible. When he could no longer improve, he would then leave Ascending Heaven City. At that time, he did not know how much his combat strength would improve. During his cultivation, the Yin-Yang mysterious sword would sometimes meet up with Chunzong and talk about the way of the sword. If this was known by others, they would be very shocked. Two transcendents talking about the way of the sword with a true martial realm cultivator was simply unbelievable. However, Chunzong's swordsmanship was so high, especially after comprehending half-step sword force in the ascending heaven tower. It had to be known that the Yin-Yang mysterious sword couple had not yet comprehended half-step sword force, not even half-step sword force. Chunzong did not tell them that he had comprehended half-step sword force. Otherwise, who knew how shocked they would be? By the way, Chunzong, when do you plan to challenge the ascending heaven tower again? Yang Xianjian asked. I've already challenged it. Chunzong thought for a moment and said. You've already challenged it? The Yin-Yang mysterious sword couple was stunned. Yes, my combat strength has been raised to the limit. It's too difficult to continue to improve, so I can only challenge it. Chunzong explained simply. Have you challenged it? Yang Xianjian asked, even more anxious than Chunzong. The last opponent on the 10th floor was an incarnation left behind by Li Tiandi. Chunzong said unhurriedly, that incarnation was too strong. I was no match for it. Then you haven't challenged it. The Yin-Yang mysterious sword couldn't help but feel disappointed. It was said that those who passed the 10th floor and entered the 11th floor had a chance to obtain Li Tiandi's inheritance. I couldn't defeat Li Tiandi's incarnation, but I gained his recognition and obtained a secret art. Chunzong said. Chunzong still didn't know what happened in the ascending heaven tower. For example, what was the use of the ascending heaven tower's phantom image? Moreover, entering the 11th floor was too shocking. If news of this spread, it would be even more unfavorable for him. Therefore, Chunzong kept a part of it. I really don't know who can pass the 10th floor and enter the 11th floor. Yang Xianjian couldn't help but sigh, but he didn't ask what secret art Chunzong obtained, because secret arts of the true martial realm were useless to transcendence. The transcendence and true martial realm were two completely different levels, and their secret arts were even more different. Chunzong, you should have noticed that many people are watching you, waiting for the day you leave Ascending Heaven City. What are your plans? Yang Xianjian changed the topic and frowned slightly. I will stay in Ascending Heaven City for a while and cultivate my secret art. I will leave when I can no longer improve. Chunzong said. The Yin-Yang mysterious sword knew that Chunzong couldn't stay in Ascending Heaven City for the rest of his life. Although it was relatively safe to stay here, he would lose his will to improve after a long time. However, if he left the city, he would most likely be killed. He couldn't advance or retreat. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.